We reference the television series Smallville a lot around here, and there's one Smallville rewatch podcast that's always at the top of my queue. Always Hold On to Smallville, hosted by our pal, Zach Moore. Zach and his guests bring tremendous insight, passion, and humor as they discuss each and every episode of the series that ushered in the renaissance of superhero TV. Listen to Always Hold On to Smallville wherever you get podcasts, and keep an eye out for the other shows under the Always Hold On to banner, including Arrow, DC's Legends of Tomorrow, Superman and Lois, and Star Wars. Fat Moose Comics is New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store. Established in 1982 and under new ownership since 2020, Moose sells a wide selection of comics from every publisher and time period, along with action figures, graphic novels, posters, statues, and more. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany the next time you're in the Garden State, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. His abilities may be of Jor-El's blood, but it was his time in Smallville with Jonathan and Martha Kent and all the people there that made Clark Kent a hero. Now, in a Digging for Kryptonite event years in the making, we revisit the seminal, decade-long television series Smallville, starring Tom Welling, and how its reinterpretation of a legend cemented my fandom and brought the Man of Steel into a new era. The final act of a Superboy fan journey is at hand. These are the Trials of Smallville. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superboy fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. These are the Trials of Smallville, and joining me in studio to discuss the heroes of the DCU as adapted on Smallville is comic book artist V. Ken Marion. Welcome back.
What's up, Anthony? Thank you so much for having me back. I'm really excited to talk about this because we haven't talked about Smallville in forever, and I haven't watched it in a really long time, so this will be a lot of fun.
Yeah, man, I always love talking Smallville with you. It was arguably the first thing you and I bonded over, and we've podcasted about Smallville before. A couple of years ago, we did an episode here counting down our top 10 favorite moments from the series.
Was that more than 1 year ago?
Yes.
Oh my God.
I have to go back and check, but I'm almost positive. And what was so fun about that was we approached it so differently, where I was there reciting scenes and doing all the dialogue. Yeah. And then you would be like, I loved when Clark stood in front of the statue and he had the wings behind him. So you really dialed in on the visuals and that iconography. And I think we complemented each other nicely. I think we had a nice mix of those moments.
For sure. For sure.
Now, since the last time you were on the show, you successfully kickstarted a comic book project. Congrats.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's called Battle Chronicles Soul Striker, and we ran a Kickstarter and we were successful with it. And now we actually have a second chance campaign for those who missed out on Indiegogo. So it's the same book, same print run, all of that. The book is all drawn. It's being colored now. Andrew Dahlhaus has the pages and he's coloring it. And so if it's a sci-fi fantasy adventure kind of book. And if anyone listening wants to go check it out, definitely go to Indiegogo and check out Battle Chronicles Soul Striker. It's X-Men meets Gundam meets Final Fantasy meets like Superman. That's kind of the pitch that I've got for it. And it's been a lot of fun, and it's definitely been a passion project of mine that me and my friend Jason Matthews co-wrote together.
Dude, I know you were checking the Kickstarter page more than I was, but I was checking it a lot as it was going because I've been down that road before myself, and I know how nerve-wracking it can be. And so, especially in those final hours, I was refreshing. I was like, is he going to make it? Is he going to make it? I was so happy that you did. And I'm excited to see the finished product. And in the show notes, I'll have a link to your link tree so people can go there and they can check everything out.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, definitely everyone listening, please go check it out. If you like what we say here tonight and want to support or just check it out and check out the art and the story, much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Awesome. All right. So the Trials of Smallville are continuing here. This week, we're getting into the heroes of the DC universe adapted on the show across its 10-year run, although, of course, it wouldn't start happening until the episode Run in season 4, which introduced Bart Allen. I want to say this will be a pretty comprehensive episode. I think we'll at least hit on virtually all of these adaptations, but I won't go so far as to say it's exhaustive. There might be someone who slips through the cracks. I don't know how much we'll have to say about Oliver's sidekick, Mia, for example, but that's another character who was there in the mix. But we'll really hit on those major adaptations. And I guess I had a few big picture questions that I wanted to pick your brain about. And I guess let me start with just this idea of the show even bringing in other DC heroes. Mm-hmm. Because I don't know how you felt at the time as you were watching those early seasons. To me, it certainly wasn't a given that the show would ever go down that road. And then it started happening. And so when it did happen, generally speaking, was it something that you were typically excited about? Did you have trepidation about any of it? Did you feel like, oh, it's too soon, he shouldn't be meeting these characters? What was the overall sense that you had?
I was stoked. It's actually really funny, and I'm not making this up. Because I watched the show with my dad, my mom every week when I was growing up, pretty much the entire way. Like even when I went to college, like we'd watch at the same time. Then I'd call my dad afterwards to talk about it. But the episode before Run came out, we were watching the show, and like in one of the commercial breaks, because this is when I was like just starting to really get into comic books, like reading them and stuff. And I really liked The Flash because I liked that Jeff Johns run was going on at the time. And during one of the commercial breaks, I said to my dad, I was like, it'd be really cool if The Flash was on this show. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, because like he runs fast, like The Flash runs fast. It'd be cool. Like it'd just be cool. Like he'd be a cool character to have just for like one episode. And then the episode ended. It said next week on Smallville, and it literally that night it showed like it was like next week The Flash, and me and my dad were like, wait, what? Like, and my dad was like, did you know that was happening? And I was like, no, I literally like, and I remember that so vividly because like it just felt like crazy that like that was actually happening, and like I had like called it before it happened, even though like it's obviously way more in advance than that, but like I didn't know about any of that. I wasn't checking websites or anything. So like for me, that was like, holy crap, this is crazy. And yeah, every time that a new episode came out, like Aquaman or whatever, I was always super hyped about it.
Yeah, I would say for myself as well, it was something that was always exciting to me. I was always curious to see how they would handle a character, how they would filter the character through the Smallville prism, so to speak. So I was always excited about it. I don't remember ever really having an issue with the fact that Clark was having all of these encounters earlier than the traditional mythology tells us. Because I know that is something that comes up, not just with the heroes, with the villains as well, who we'll talk about next week, and hell, with a character like Lois Lane, right? It's something that comes up with the show, this notion that he's meeting these people a lot sooner than you would typically see. But I feel like it didn't bother me for a couple of reasons. One, going back to Lois, we had already had Lois Lane introduced on the show. So from the jump, from season 1, the show was its own thing. But then with season 4, they bring in Lois Lane, and she's inserted into his story at a much earlier point than you typically see. So I guess consciously or not, like I just had the sense this is its own thing. And I mean, I didn't know this at the time because I had read almost no pre-crisis comics at that point. But now that I have gone back, and especially have gone back and looked at pre-crisis Superboy stuff, Superboy was meeting DC heroes all the time through time travel machinations or in the present day. Or there's a trade on my shelf here, the greatest Superboy team up stories ever told. So again, I didn't know it at the time, but now that I kind of have that wider view, it's like, yeah, this was not so outside the norm, really.
Yeah. I didn't have an issue with it. I pretty much from the jump, like I always just kind of saw it as like its own thing. Like you said, I think it was like subconsciously, like it never like bothered me that like things were happening out of order or whatever. To me, it was just like, oh, this is this take of it, Also, there was my only real Superman tether at that point was the Christopher Reeve movies. Like I know Lois and Clark and all that stuff was out, but like the only thing I really thought of was Christopher Reeve movies. So those first 4 seasons to me very much felt like they could have turned into like headcanon it into the Christopher Reeve movies,
Yeah, no, for sure. And then I think the biggest thing, though, that made me not just on board with this, but excited for it, and rewatching all of these episodes reaffirmed this, which is there was a reason why they brought each of these characters on. They all played a certain part in Clark's story. And I think what you see pretty consistently, maybe with 1 or 2 exceptions, but pretty consistently, starting with Bart in Run and going all the way through to Booster Gold in the Booster episode in season 10, where virtually all of these heroes who would come on would be further along in their journey than Clark in some way, shape, or form. Bart, for example, didn't view his powers as a curse. They were a gift, and he relished them.
Yeah.
Yet, virtually all of them still needed some straightening out, some sort of moral correction that Clark, through his words and his example, was able to provide. Again, like Bart, he relishes his powers, he embraces them. I sound like Lex in the series finale. But at the same time, he is a thief, a pickpocket. He steals Jonathan's wallet and he figures, oh, it's no big deal because the credit card company won't make him pay for it or insurance will cover it or whatever the case may be. And Clark sets him straight. And so again, this idea of the Smallville filter here, all these characters, again, were further along in some way, but it wasn't just them being ahead of the game with respect to Clark. There was something that he needed to impart to them as well. And so I feel like episode after episode, you kind of see them helping each other as their stories are intersecting.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It literally pretty much consistently was they, like you're saying, they were ahead on something, but Superman or Clark was basically showing them like the noble path. You know what I mean? That was kind of consistent for every character. You know what I mean? It was kind of like they're doing something, but they're like being a little too like reckless or something. You know what I mean? And like that was kind of the consistent path with pretty much everyone. They both imparted wisdom for each other. And that was cool.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. And it's something that rewatching it hit me in a way that I don't know that it did the first time around. I mean, it must have to some extent, but this is the first time I ever rewatched all of the Hero episodes in a row.
Same, yeah.
And so you see those patterns form. And we're talking about different iterations of the show, different showrunners. And we'll talk about this. I think you definitely see a shift in the heroes they bring on and how they're depicted when you get into that final era, that final iteration of the show, the Metropolis years, where I feel like for the Alan Miles era of the show, those first 7 seasons, it's largely proto versions of the character that they'll become. Oliver might be a bit of an exception there because he comes in costume and everything. Yeah,
I definitely preferred the proto versions, like how Clark was a proto version. We can get into it, like the later rewatching these episodes in a row. Not only do you see the similarities with like the heroes, but you also see a quick sort of encapsulation of how the show changed from season to season, and it did become like I love the show, but my fondest memories of it are the first 4 to 5 seasons, and rewatching it again, I'm like, I understand why it did kind of, to me, the show is better when it was more earnest and more real and grounded in like real emotions and relatability and dialogue and stuff. And like, as it went on, it got comic booky and comic bookier, and like just from the colors and like the blurry kind of like effects they would shoot stuff with. And like, it felt more and more toward like what the CW superhero shows would become with like Arrow and Flash. And those first seasons felt almost more like Batman Begins to me, like where it was like sort of like very rooted in earnest. And like the end definitely feels a little more corny to some degree, but like I still love it. But like the first half is definitely like where my heart lies with the show.
No, beautifully said. And I agree. And this was something that I had mentioned in one of our earlier episodes, I think, where I think for a while, those final seasons loomed larger in my mind and in my memory because they were more recent and because they did pull in so much from the comics. And not that I forgot the earlier seasons, but like I said, I think those later ones just loomed a little bit larger. They were more recent and fresher in my mind. And one of the things that I'm really appreciative of about going back and rewatching so many, especially from those early seasons, it just reminded me how great they were and reignited my passion for those early seasons, which really represent the show at its core, at its heart, at its best, I think, even though there's a lot to enjoy in those later seasons. But you're right, it does get a lot more comic booky. And we love Jeff Johns, and we've talked about the comic book work of Jeff Johns on this podcast a lot.
He's the best.
And he wrote some of the episodes that we'll touch on here. He wrote the Legion episode. He wrote the Justice Society 2-parter. And I love those episodes. And I'm going to talk about all the things I love about those episodes. But as I was watching them, there were points where I'm like, oh, this sounds more like a comic book. Like when the characters start recounting their backstory. Oh, and he wrote Booster as well. And that's what was on my mind when at the end of the episode, Clark and Booster are having this heart-to-heart. And Booster just like launches into, well, I was this football star and I started betting on games and then I started throwing games. And it just, you know, in some way, shape, or form, we get every character's backstory. We get that exposition. But it just, in those episodes in particular, it just kind of read like it would on a comic book page, for example.
Yeah. Well, I also noticed with the Legion episode, like, I don't know if this is the writing or the shooting or the acting per se, but like maybe I'm biased, but my favorite of all of these episodes is the Flash episode. And I use that as a comparison, like with the actor who played the Flash versus the actors who played the Legion. Like whenever you see the Legion characters, they're very like like they're always staying very like straight, and like when they walk in unison with each other and turn in unison, and like it feels like odd a little bit, right? But then like Bart, like he stands like a normal person. He talks like a normal person. He like the way he like moves around the room is like a normal person. Like the way he delivers his dialogue feels very natural. So like, and again, I don't know if that was direction, if it was like, because it's not just the Legion actors. It's like pretty much all the superheroes that they bring in later. They have this like vibe to them where they cut to commercial, they zoom the camera in up underneath their chin, and like, and they turn, they're like, they say something, they say like a quippy line, you know, like, and it's like, I don't know if that's like the style that they were going for or whatever, but like, I definitely liked the first like Flash, Aquaman, Cyborg, and the first Green Arrow episodes, like I think more than like the later ones. But that is me being like a little nitpicky, I guess. But like those first ones were so earnest and well done.
No, I agree. I had the same reaction. Legion, it really does hold a special place for me. And that one kind of walks the line as we're in season 8. We're in that later iteration, but it had enough of that feel of those earlier hero introductions for me, I guess. But yeah, I do gravitate mostly towards those earlier season hero encounters as well. So I guess you answered my next question about what your favorite or what you think the most effective one was, which was Bart.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've got a hot take on that. I think he's the best live action Flash we've ever had. Rewatching it, I really do. Cause I think when I think of the character, and I think a lot of people think this way, like that's the personality that I attribute to the Flash. Like I don't really attribute the science nerd detective guy, like the classic Barry Allen is. That's not in my head. Like I know that's what he was in the Silver Age, but in my head, the Flash is a version of like what he was in the animated show and like the Wally West books I grew up with. And like, I'm sure there's plenty of people who feel that way about me, but like the same as me, but like, to me, like, I know he played Bart, but like it whatever. It's like, it's, you know, it's like an amalgamation of all the characters really. And like, I think just how he acted to me was the personality wise, the most true to how I see the character.
1,000%. He's far and away my favorite as well.
Like even compared to like Grant Gustin.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I
gotta say, and I love Grant Gustin. Steph and I went to see the musical that he's in on Broadway, Water for Elephants. We support this guy. We love Grant Gustin.
Grant's awesome. Yeah, he's awesome.
We love Grant Gustin. And in fairness, I know we do have a lot of John Wesley Shipp fans out there. I have the 90s Flash series on Blu-ray sitting on my shelf. I'm going to watch it. We'll do a Patreon episode on it. My position might change, but no, that Bart episode run holds a very special place. It is, I think, fair to say, even more so than Justice, which is a ton of fun and kind of amazing that it happened.
Yeah.
But honestly, that Bart episode, it does remain my favorite. We'll talk more about it, but let me ask kind of the flip of it, not to be negative, but were there ones that you found, or one, I guess in particular, that you thought was the least effective in terms of these introductions? Because I have a specific take on this, but I'm curious.
Okay, so I didn't get a chance to rewatch all of them. I missed the Booster one and I missed the Wonder Twins one. So those are the two that I missed. Yeah, but the ones I did watch, oh man, I mean, the Zatanna one didn't really strike me that much, but I think it's probably the Black Canary one. Would probably be my least. I mean, the Zatanna one, I think the premise of it was good, but it was like more in the later, the style of the show fully tilted into that like full on comic book, like kind of like wink and nod kind of corny version. But the Black Canary version was like, I don't know. I'm trying to think least effective. I don't know. Probably one of those two. I really don't know though.
For me, it was Cyborg and Black Canary.
I liked Cyborg. I liked the Cyborg one.
So this is the problem that I had kind of with both of them. So I know it's Smallville, right? It's a Superman show, a Clark Kent show. And so we're seeing how all of these characters interact with Clark, and we're seeing it through that lens. Totally on board with that. But I kind of like what we see in virtually all of these other instances where it really is more of this intersection as opposed to a Superman story kind of usurping the character's origin. And by that, I mean with Cyborg in particular, typically, right, it's his father who saves his life and turns him into this cyborg. And here we have this spin on it where it's scientists under the direction of Lex Luthor. So Cyborg becomes this Lex Luthor experiment, which is fine. I mean, it's not the hill I'm going to die on, but I kind of like the idea of his character, his origin kind of being more complete unto itself and then intersecting with Clark as opposed to kind of being co-opted by Lex and the Superman story. The other thing though, and I guess this is a good segue to another big picture thing I wanted to ask you, just about the visuals and the designs of all this. I felt they really left something on the table with Cyborg. I know this was a long time ago, and I'm not expecting DCEU Cyborg with full CGI, but it's like you can't put a plate on half of his face. Because the whole thing is like, he feels so, like he's so different. And in that episode, the whole crux of his emotional arc is, he didn't want to be saved. He lost his whole family, and he's scared about telling his girlfriend about what's become of him. But he looks completely normal. And unless I'm forgetting it, it's like, I don't think there's even a line about I feel different or I can't feel sensations anymore. I mean, Clark x-rays him and he's got all the machinery inside.
The eye thing. Yeah. But like, so I would have agreed with you had I not watched all of like the Justice Society episode, for example, just recently, just today. And like the costuming is like, again, I don't want to be negative, but like it leaves a lot to be desired. Right. And I think that going to the Ernest thing, like if they had like an eyepiece on that like didn't look right, like it looked when he turned his head, it was like janking around and stuff. Like I think it would have really not held up as well. So like, given that they weren't putting a ton of money into these costumes and stuff, I think what they did was like good enough to keep it in that grounded kind of way. But you are right. Like did you ever watch the Disney Channel growing up?
Not really, to be honest.
Did you remember that show, The Famous Jet Jackson?
No.
Well, the guy who played Cyborg was that actor. And like when I was rewatching, I had forgotten that. And I was like, and Laura was in the room with me and I was like, oh, Jet Jackson Cyborg. She's like, what? And she came in and she's like, wait, so like, is he Cyborg yet? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, so he just doesn't have any metal on him at all. And like, I'm like, what's under his skin? Like, so like there is that, you know?
Yeah. And that was the late Lee Thompson Young, very tragic passing. But it's just, I just feel like they were lazy in the design there, if you can even call it that, because he just looks normal. And I guess I would be more okay with it if, again, they made a bigger point about how he feels or how he doesn't feel. He doesn't feel sensations or he sees things differently, whatever.
Yeah.
Just to kind of highlight how different he is. I feel like we lost something there. And then I guess we could talk more about Black Canary when we get to the Siren episode. But similarly there too, you get essentially no backstory for her.
Yeah, that was the thing that I didn't get with her was like, hers, I guess the reason why I think hers would probably be my least favorite is because it just sort of felt like we're just shoving the character in there. You know what I mean? Like there's no real explanation to why she's got a costume, no real explanation to why she's doing what she's doing. Like, you know, and it's just kind of like.
Yeah, and she's working for Lex. So again, sort of co-opting a hero's origin story. I mean, it's a little different in that case. But it's just like we don't get an origin story. And all we get is she's on the wrong side working for Lex. And they try to set up this whole kind of like left-wing, right-wing divide between her and Oliver, where she wants to protect even the wealthy from having their things stolen. And she sees him and his merry band as these terrorists. And he's like, no, we're freedom fighters. Or he doesn't say that, but we're the good guys sort of thing. So they try to set up this divide. It doesn't really feel like it works, to me at least. We don't get her backstory. Again, it's sort of conflated with Lex, and
I think her look doesn't really work. Yeah,
the whole thing, Black Canary, long blonde hair, wig or otherwise. Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah,
and one of the, obviously the voice and all of that, but like, come on.
Yeah, the look definitely, and the grease paint eye thing, which is like, I even in Arrow, I've always thought that a weird choice. This because I feel like that would take so much longer to put on than like a mask. That, yeah. like when Arrow or her, like they're like, oh, there's crime, and like you're like, oh, I got it in my eye, and they're trying to, you know what I mean? Like just the practicality of that is so crazy.
Well, the worst on Arrow was when they got to Mr. Terrific, and I love the character.
Oh, I don't think I ever saw those.
But it's like in his civilian guise, he had an afro, and as Mr. Terrific, he had cornrows, and it's like, You're doing this every time you suit up? It's like, this is impossible.
That takes like hours.
This is impossible. Yeah. So people might be surprised. Normally, this isn't something I would harp on. Like, she didn't have long blonde hair, but I don't know. It just feels like, come on, what are we doing? She has short blonde hair in that initial appearance. And then as Dinah, she had the long black wig. But I just feel like if you're going to go for it, and they gave her the fishnets and the leather, like so much of the rest of it was there.
Yeah.
I just kind of feel like go for it all the way. Now,
Zatanna, they nailed the look.
Zatanna, they nailed. Yeah. Now, look, whenever we talk about anyone's appearance, we keep it classy. We're respectful. All I'll say, to put it in Smallville terms, if I were Kryptonian, we might have some heat vision blasts going on. I thought they really nailed the look. They nailed the look for Zatanna.
Yeah. And her episode, like, I just think, like, it wasn't so much how they handled her. It was just like the conceit of the show. Like I just felt it was a little kind of like zany. You know what I mean? The plot of the show is a little zany, but like her stuff, they nailed her stuff.
Yeah. One of the things we'll talk about as we get deeper in is with Legion and Hex in particular, it really plays on this idea of Chloe, her role in the mythology, and Chloe becoming Lois, like things that fans had speculated about. It was interesting to see how the show addressed it in its later years. But, and then the other big picture thing that I just want to say, because we just did a whole episode on Lex and his evolution across the show and the descent of Lex Luthor. And that was the other thing that was funny to watch as we go from season to season with these hero episodes. Like in Run, when he catches up with the fence that Bart has tried to sell this manuscript to that he stole from Lex, and Bart gets knocked out and Lex sees him on the ground. He's like, he's just a kid, let him go.
Yeah.
Great. Like that's, season 4 Lex. So, Lex, a little devious, a little shady, but he's like, he's just a kid, let him go. Then you get to season 5.
And he's like torturing Aquaman.
That water torture with poor AC. I mean, he was really, he's really making a meal out of that. And then you get to Cyborg. And for most of the episode, he's claiming he knows nothing about this subsidiary of Luthor Corp that's performing these experiments. And then, of course, he's the one pulling the strings. He's the mastermind. He wants to implant this chip into Victor that will essentially control him, even though he doesn't present it that way. So we get to that point. And then you get to Justice, our big team coming together episode, and he traps Bart, a far cry from Let the Kid Go. He traps him in that death machine where he has to keep running or be electrocuted. You really get to see him evolve or devolve, I guess, across the series,
Yeah, no, it's crazy, man. Seeing it that quickly too, like it was, reminding myself like, oh, there's a lot going on. And also what was also hard for me to track was the B plots of all, like what was going on throughout the season. I was like, wait, so where is this now in the season? Does Lois know? Does she not? Like, that was another fun thing to track. The opposite of you. So the first like 4 to 5 seasons, 1 through 4 for sure, and then a little bit of 5 are like locked in my memory bank because like I had the DVDs of those, and that was when I was in high school, and me and my friends would always just throw them on like when we were like hanging out or whatever. Like, and so I've rewatched those shows so many times. The later ones, like 6 on, I only really watched them like once, maybe twice when the DVDs came out. So like those, I'm so fuzzy on the details of it. So for some of this later stuff, people are going to think like, you didn't even watch this show. I'm like, I just can't remember. Like I hadn't seen like season 10, for example, I haven't watched since 2010. So it's like,
it's all good. One of the things, no matter what we're talking about, Smallville or anything else, there's always a range of experience level in terms of the audience, right? There are people who know these episodes inside and out better than either or both of us. Others who, I'm sure we're going to have people listening to these episodes who have never really watched Smallville or only watched a little bit of it or dropped off at a certain point. So it's all good. We all come at it from our perspective. And then the last sort of overall thing I just want to say, we're here to talk about what the show did, the characters they actually did bring in. But of course, I don't know that you could do a full discussion of the heroes of the DCU as shown on Smallville without acknowledging probably the 2 biggest omissions.
Well, I'd say 3. I'd say there's 3.
What's the third?
Well, I mean, you're going to say
Batman and Wonder Woman
and Green Lantern.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I mean, I guess, what's even my question? Were those omissions, did you miss those characters? Was that something where you longed to see them? Or?
I think Green Lantern would have been awesome. I really do think that. The Batman of it all, like, I think it would have been really cool to see Bruce Wayne, like, especially in the early years. But I think a full-blown Batman, I think, would have looked really bad on Smallville. Like, if like Hawkman is a meter that we're measuring things by, like, I don't think it would have looked very cool if we straight up had Batman. But if we had like a young Bruce Wayne, like before Oliver came in, I think that would have been really cool. Or like Wonder Woman. I feel like Wonder Woman would probably look better. You know what I mean? Because like her costume, you could do a very stripped down version of her costume where like even if she just has like this shield and the sword or something, it could still be recognized as Wonder Woman. So you don't have to do the full blown like stars and everything. But that would have been cool to have her too. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, it's the sort of thing, I guess, it's interesting to kind of keep the context in mind where this was the era where Warner Brothers, the movie division, right, kept such a tighter grip on everything. And there were all of these restrictions. That's why we didn't see those characters, Batman and Wonder Woman in particular. It's why Lois could only appear in X number of episodes, and we could only kind of go so far with her and Clark until the later seasons. So even though I didn't love it at the time, I guess I just sort of like, that's just the way it was.
Yeah.
Right. You didn't have this cross-pollination of characters. You didn't have the multiverse. It was, not to make us sound like old men, but like it really was a different time. And that's the other thing. And you and I were talking about this off mic beforehand, but even when we get into the costumes and all of that, regardless of how they turned out on the show, it is important to keep in mind, right? This was well before the Arrowverse and the DCEU. So they broke a lot of ground with all of this. But I mean,
I was just giving Hawkman some shade just now, but like, I mean, it was Hawkman on TV. Like,
yeah, they did the wings.
Cool.
Did the wings. I mean, they did it.
Yeah,
as best as they could, and also in those later seasons, they didn't have the budget that they used to have. You know, so I think they were working within certain confines, and I'm impressed with what they were able to do.
If WB would have allowed it, would you have preferred Justin Hartley being Bruce Wayne?
No, I don't know about that.
Or maybe not him, but like saying like instead of Green Arrow being that role in the show, would you have preferred Bruce Wayne, like Batman?
Well, so that's kind of what I was getting at, but maybe from the other side. I think why I never really missed Batman too much on the show was I feel like we really saw what they would have done with him, because I think they basically just glommed all of it on to Oliver.
For sure. Yeah.
So yeah, would it have been better for that to have been Bruce Wayne instead of Oliver Queen? I mean, maybe, I don't know, but Batman gets so much play. There's something kind of cool, I think, about the fact that it ended up being Oliver that played this large role in his story.
No, for real. I think that how do I put this? The fact that he has such a tight grip on Batman, they wouldn't let them use him, it really elevated the character of Green Arrow. And I don't mean like in the show, but it just in pop culture. Like, because Arrow the show never would have existed if Green Arrow wasn't in Smallville, right?
No.
And if Arrow the show doesn't exist, people wouldn't know Green Arrow, the character, exists. Because like I remember like in high school, for example, I remember talking to friends about superheroes. Nobody knew who Green Arrow was. Like they had no idea. And like, but now he is a very marketable, recognizable, valuable IP, that character just for DC, you know? And like, I think that can all be attributed to Smallville, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I was thinking about this because my pre-crisis Green Arrow knowledge is very limited, but I think he was generally established as kind of a contemporary of the other Justice League characters. But then you get into the era of comics that we grew up with, the post-crisis era, where Oliver's older. I mean, like, that's the Green Arrow I grew up with. He was, I don't want to say an old man, but like, he was older. He was in his 40s. He was not a contemporary of the rest of our characters. And so it was interesting at the time. I mean, for me, I guess I did recognize that as a deviation, that we have a much younger Oliver Queen than was being depicted in the comics at the time.
You know, what's funny is like, because I grew up with Connor Hawke as my Green Arrow. So like when he showed up on Smallville, I was wait, Oliver. Actually, no, I think my first introduction to Oliver might have been Green Lantern Rebirth, now that I'm thinking about it. I think it was. Because he was in that, right? Yeah, he was. So yeah. I think that era, it was like, so yeah, a couple of years, I guess, before he showed up on Smallville. But like, as a kid, I didn't know that Connor Hawke and Oliver Queen were two, you know what I mean? Like, it was like this whole thing. So like
a young Archer, like that's what you knew.
Yeah.
So, but no, I love what the show was able to do with him. It's funny because as I've been talking about, there's so much about Smallville that really imprinted on me in terms of what I look for in a Superman story. I'm always looking for that past between Clark and Lex. But for whatever reason, even though I really like what they did with Oliver, I guess in my head, I don't think of Oliver as like a Superman supporting character or as a character who played this pivotal role in a young Clark's journey. I really do see it really confined to this show.
Yeah,
again, as opposed to a lot of other aspects that really have become so ingrained in me. But then I do think about it, and it is kind of cool. In this story, you have him part of Clark's early story. You go to the comics, when Oliver dies in the comics, Clark's there. Clark's there with him on the plane when he's got his hand in that bomb, and it's the dead man switch, and he doesn't want to lose his arm because he won't be able to be an archer, so he sacrifices himself and he blows up. And Clark's, so I don't know, kind of interesting when they do kind of cross paths like that in different media.
That is cool. Do you think, when you think live action Green Arrow in your head, do you think Justin Hartley or do you think Stephen Amell?
Oh man, that's a good question. I mean, I did watch Arrow all the way through. All the other Arrowverse shows, I tapped out after Crisis pretty much, but I did watch I mean, there was only a couple episodes left of Arrow, but
Yeah.
I did watch that one all the way through, and that was 8 seasons. I think I probably would say Amel, but Hartley's up there, man. What about you?
I actually, so it's funny because you're saying like you don't think of Green Arrow as a Superman character. It's probably because Arrow came on right after and it did such a deep dive on like making him his own character. I don't know, like maybe Stephen Amell, but after watching these episodes, like I kind of like the personality that Justin Hartley has more as the character.
Well, he's far more of the like the playboy,
Yeah.
sarcastic than you see in
Yeah, like
Arrow.
you feel like he has more personality, but I think Stephen Amell's looks cooler in the costume. Like I feel like that the Smallville costume, while it doesn't look bad, it doesn't look quite as cool as what they did in Arrow.
Yeah.
Especially toward the later years when they gave him like the armor and stuff like so. But yeah, the Smallville costume, the look doesn't look bad. Like for him, I think it really works. The whole like hoodie, sunglasses thing, like for that character, it works. It doesn't work so good for Flash and Cyborg, but like for Green Arrow, I think it works really well.
Yeah. And I really can't stress this enough because I know, one of our patrons, we did a Patreon episode together not too long ago, and he's in his mid-20s. Shout out to Chase. And he hasn't watched Smallville yet, but he was talking about how he loves early Superman stories or stories about Clark's younger days. I'm like, you're really going to love Smallville.
Oh, for sure.
I hope he watches it and he enjoys it. But it was so interesting talking to someone who's a decade plus younger than me. And again, like just for the context, you might look at something like Justice Now, where yes, they look like the characters in terms of the colors, but they've got the hood and the sunglasses. They're not the full on costumes that we would expect. But at the time,
yeah,
it was kind of amazing to just have that.
I mean, to Flash and Aquaman, I think that was our first live action Aquaman, like ever. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was.
I'm almost certain it was. The only thing I'm thinking about is that there was that in late 90s Justice League pilot that didn't go to series, very low budget, but I don't think he was in it. Yeah. And well, all right. So let's, I guess on that note, you want to dive in more, no pun intended, more specifically to these. Well, I guess my question as we jump into these, you wet and ready, bro?
Ready, bro.
He jumps up off of that table. Well, wet and ready, bro.
Dude, that was a huge, that was like a real, because I was like, we were watching that, me and my wife, and I was like, this guy became like such a good actor, but like in this show, he is like, it's pretty rough. Like his Aquaman in the first episode is pretty rough, but he's a great actor now. I just saw it was a movie with Henry Cavill actually, where they played British. It was like
I haven't seen it, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's the Ungentlemanly Warfare, something of Ungentlemanly Warfare, and he's in it. He's really good. Like nails the Swedish accent or wherever he's supposed to be playing, and like really good actor.
You watch Reacher?
I haven't seen Reacher yet, but I heard it's amazing. Yeah.
I think you'll like it. And Serinda Swan, who played Zatanna, is in season 2.
Is she really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm going to have to watch it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, kind of on that note, it is amazing. That's one of the other things that's been fun about going back and watching these episodes. Now that we've seen where these actors' careers have gone. And did you watch This Is Us?
I have not. No. Who's on that?
So Justin Hartley is one of the main characters. That's the NBC drama about the family.
I have never seen it. No.
It was huge at the time. It ended a couple of years ago, but Justin Hartley was main character on that and really showed his acting chops. And I used to see them on display here too. He brought a lot of humanity to this character.
No, he's great on this show. Justin Hartley he knocks out of the park. And like I said, I think he does a better job as Oliver Queen than Stephen Amell in a lot of ways. Cause like he has a lot of personality and warmth in his character, a different take, completely different take, but like,
I know he's so good. There were so many like little one-liners where I think just the delivery elevated it a tiny moment, but in the Justice Society episode after Hawkman throws Ollie through the glass and Chloe's patching him up, and she's, cleaning his wounds and he's like, ow. And she's like, I thought you said it didn't hurt. He goes, I lied.
Yeah.
But just a little delivery, like it really pops.
Yeah, no, because a lot of those, like the witty banter can come off as really corny or bad when delivered wrong. And I feel like there's a lot of instances in the show where that does happen, where like the witty banter is just kind of like, ugh. But it always works with him. And I think it straight up comes to like the acting and the delivery of it. Like he does a really good job, like delivering that witty banter in a way that's like not annoying and not cringy. And like, it's almost like this is just my personality,
Yeah. But anyway, so season 4 is the first instance that we get a DC hero introduced, and it's Bart. And next week, when we talk about the villains, we'll talk about how season 4 also marked the first DC villain the show brought in, Mikhail Mixospitalik.
Oh yeah,
not the best, but still.
I liked it.
Do you really? All right.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't rewatched it yet, so maybe I'll feel differently. I don't have a fond memory of it, but interesting that in season 4, right, we start to kind of open up this world a little bit, and I think it's such a testament to Kyle Gallner, who played Bart, where, like you said, the character is kind of an amalgam. He's called Bart. He has fake IDs for Jay Garrick, Barry Allen, Wally West, so they threw those names in there. I mean, in terms of characterization, I guess he's Impulse-esque. He is pretty impulsive.
He's the Flash, dude. I hate that they called his name Impulse like later on. I hate that. I don't know why. It must have been one of those WB things that like.
Yeah, I assume that was the restriction, and also it's like you don't think of it. Again, not that we're beholden to the comics, but I wouldn't necessarily think of any connection between Superman and Impulse per se. I mean, I think had this been Wally West, it would have tracked a lot more in terms of my internal DC fan logic. And on top of that, they play real fast and loose with the backstory here, where he kind of just talks about, what does he say, lightning storm or something like that, or just lightning involved in an accident, which, again, would be more in line with Barry or Wally, right? Not necessarily Bart, who comes from the future, that whole business. I know there's a line where he's flirting with Chloe and he's like, I came from the future.
Yeah.
So like they peppered in all this stuff, but I guess my point is they don't give you a lot here. Like they give you a kid named Bart who's fast, but he's so endearing that you're just like, it's the Flash, and you're on board with it.
Yeah. 100%, dude. 100%. Like I said, I think he's the best live action Flash we've had, and which is like saying a lot because Grant Gustin was great.
Yeah.
We'll leave it at that. But yeah, like I think he is, and John Wesley Shipp is really good too. But like he just nails that personality that like I've always associated with the character, probably very much from the cartoon show, from the Superman cartoon show and the Justice League cartoon show.
Like there's a looseness to him.
He's a swagger. He's got a swagger that none of the other people who play the Flash have. And I think that's so important to the character because like I've always said this, like to me, the Flash, I've always seen him, like he should feel kind of like a super jock.
Yeah. Like, and just the fact that you have a character who can kind of take the piss out of Clark in a fun way. Like when he leaves Clark in the dust, I think from the hotel, and then he's waiting for Clark at the farm. He's like, what took you so long?
Yeah. Or like when he's eating a cookie and he's like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm eating a cookie, dude. I'm starving. Like his just his delivery of all the lines are like really endearing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. And so, like I said at the top, the fact that you have Bart sort of highlighting, hey, these powers you have, they're a gift. Like you don't have to view them as such a burden. I think is important for Clark. I don't know how much Clark really employs that advice moving forward. You don't really see many instances on the show before or after where he kind of enjoys his powers. I mean, you go back to the pilot, there's a scene where he stacks up Whitney and the bully's cars after they string him up as a scarecrow. Like that's great. He's so pleased with himself as he's walking off. And even just earlier in the pilot when he misses the bus and he runs to school, and there's kind of a lightness and a joy to the character that you often didn't see because so much of the show was about the weight of this, the burden of this, how hard it is to keep this secret, how much he wants to be normal. But with Bart, it just kind of opens up this other side. And I think the secret sauce with this too is that Tom Welling, for whatever reason, like whatever it is, something innate with him, so excels in that big brother capacity. And you see that in the Ryan episodes earlier in the show. And there's that episode Fragile in season 5 that Tom Welling directs, with a little girl that he kind of takes that role with as well. There's just something that really works when he's in that capacity. And so you do have this big brother, little brother dynamic between them. And it's so fun. And it provides an avenue for Clark to just kind of let loose a little bit. Like when they run down to Florida, or then in the Justice episode, they go to Mexico and get burritos. It's like, this is great. So yeah, like stuff like that was great. And then the line that we hear first in Run, and then they'll call back to it in Justice about, I'll be gone before you can even blink. Yeah. I can blink pretty fast. You know, I mean, it's, and the other big thing, Clark assumes in Run that Bart is infected by the meteor rocks because that's what he's experienced so far. Like everyone with these special abilities virtually has been meteor infected. And so that kind of, I think is a key piece too, that it's like, there's this other world of characters out there.
I love that when he's like, when Bart's going down his origin, he's like, I got hit with this blast of light, and he's like, I got put into overdrive or whatever he says. And Tom Welling's like, or Clark's like, this will happen in Smallville. And he's like, no, never been here. And I don't plan on coming back. Like,
Yeah.
He's very endearing. I think of all the extra characters that they brought in, I think Justin Hartley was really good too, but I think he was really, really well cast. I think he was like the best sort of version of like he felt like the comic book. He felt like the proto version that would grow up to be the Wally West I was reading in the books, even though I know it's Bart, but like, you know what I mean? Like it just tracked for me, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, Clark does hammer home that message of, you know, you should use your powers to help people. And it is interesting though, because Bart pushes him at a certain point. He's like, why? Like, why can't I do this?
Yeah.
And Clark says, well, they're laws.
Yeah.
You know, which it is an interesting thing when you really push it. It's like, well, all right, what is the reasoning for all of this?
Yeah.
But I think Clark ultimately does make his point, and Bart does have this change of heart where he's going to leave Clark susceptible to the kryptonite and make off with the manuscript that he's stolen from Lex. But then he closes the lead box, and unbeknownst to Clark off screen, he returns the manuscript. So he has that change of heart before they part.
Yeah.
And before they part, I mean, look, we'll see a lot of this in these episodes, kind of these nods to the future, where he's like, oh, I'm going to see if there are more people like us out there and form like a club or league or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Clark tries to get him to stay. And then they race to Rascal Flats. Feel like today. Oh,
so good. Dude, that was something I wanted to bring up was the music. Losing the licensed music in later seasons really hurt the show.
Yes.
Like having the radio popular licensed music with the needle drops like worked so good in this show. Yeah. In this scene in particular, like I've watched that scene many times on YouTube, and it's just a feel good scene, you know?
It's so, I know I've said this on the show before, but it's why when people talk about the Justice cut of Justice League and the Superman Flash race at the end, it's like, yeah, it's cool, I guess, but it's like, I think a race between them, this is what I go to by far.
Yeah.
It's so cool. And
the Flash wins. Like he's faster. And
he's faster by a lot, which was such a nice touch when he turns around and starts running backwards. It's like, oh, like he's just toying with you.
Yeah.
And he just leaves him in the dust. And I love Clark's reaction to that, where he stops and there's like this shock, but then he smiles.
He smiles and he's like, that's kind of cool. Yeah.
I know. You got to give, I always say this. It's like, you got to give Flash the win. It's like his one thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why there are certain fan debates I don't get. Like, I don't really get why this is a thing. Why do we have to argue that Superman would be faster? It's like, just,
he's not. Like,
it's the Flash's thing.
Yeah. Like the Flash like runs through time. Like it's like his, I don't know.
Obviously we'll see him again in Injustice, but then early in season 5, so just about a season later here, we get this Aqua episode. Now, he has a little bit of fun with the fact that we're dealing with a landlocked state, which is something Clark calls out.
How does he even get there? Like, how does he get there?
Yeah, I know. Well, by land, I guess, but as long as he stays hydrated, I suppose.
Yeah. But like when he leaves, he like jumps in the lake as if he's like swimming off into the ocean, but like,
oh yeah.
Remember? It's like, I mean, I know rivers and stuff go into the ocean, but like you can't really like swim in a lot of those rivers. A lot of those rivers are like this shallow, you know what I mean? Like, so
I know.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So overall, your take on AC Arthur Curry as we meet here?
I liked it as a kid. You know what I mean? When I was in high school, I just thought it was cool to see Aquaman like on a show. And watching it back now, I don't think it's as good as Run, but I do think it is a strong episode. Like, I think it's a really strong episode. And like I said, like Alan Ritchson, I know now he's a very good actor, but at the time in this show, he's not bad. Like he's not bad, but he just kind of comes off as kind of like douche bro kind of a little bit. You know what I mean? Like that's just kind of like the personality they give him. And it's like okay, but it's not, like I said, not horrible. And I like that it does feel like proto Aquaman. Like he's not in the costume and stuff. You know, it's like it feels like it's fit in this like before we become the superhero kind of thing.
Yeah, and this was one of his first roles, if not his first role. So this was very early days for him as an actor.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I mean, I wonder the line between the performance versus the acting versus the directing that kind of yielded this result. But yes, it's very much, again, the wet and ready, stay super bro. It's like, that's the vibe. That's the vibe of this character. Definitely makes him stand out, though, among all of them.
It's funny because like Jason Momoa is kind of like that, too. I feel like in media, they've kind of much like with the Flash being like, you know, like how we see this cocky swaggery guy, I feel like with Aquaman, they've kind of leaned into this surfer bro kind of, which to me, it works. Like it works giving them these different personalities. Like they don't all have to be just like the stoic, heroic, like square kind of characters, right? Like I think it does work having him be like this, like hang 10 dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like I think it really works.
Yeah. I mean, look, Aquaman, not a character that tends to get a lot of love, a lot of attention, a lot of respect, or at least historically. I think now we've seen a big shift. He's had big movies.
$1 billion movie. And
now though, but I mean, this was well before. So yeah, again, I think Smallville deserves a lot of credit. I think.
Do you think they should have, if you could go back in time, would you cast Adrian Grenier in this? Is that what you do?
I love that entourage line, man. That was great. It's like, who are you working with? I don't travel with an entourage.
Yeah, it was so good.
That's one of those things, again, not to make us sound like old men, but it's like, if you're watching this now and you've never watched Entourage, like that line, you would be like, what are they talking about?
What is that even? You probably wouldn't even like get that as a reference.
But this was a whole thing, the HBO series Entourage, where the main actor on the show was cast in a live action Aquaman
James Cameron's
movie.
Aquaman.
James Cameron's Aquaman. It was a whole thing. And right around this time. So I remember so much fun when they dropped that in there. About, I don't travel with an entourage. It's like, oh, it's great.
So good.
But yeah, I mean, I like this take. And obviously what brings him to Smallville, to the lakes, right, is this weapon that Lex is developing for the military that is killing sea life. Mm-hmm. And that's what he wants to stop. And so here, again, in terms of that push and pull, where a character is further along in certain ways, but not in others, AC has this big point that he says throughout the episode, particularly to Clark, about like, I care about the world around me. Mm-hmm. Right. So we're really getting into this idea now, and Ollie's really going to hammer this home in season 6 about there's a whole world out there, Clark. You can't wait for people to come to you. So just kind of more of this global awareness and proactive nature, I think is something that AC kind of brings to the table. But I guess in terms of what Clark can impart, Clark stops him when he's going to blow up the lab. Mm-hmm. I mean, in the end, they end up destroying the equipment. So,
well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I know I said before that like I was being a little harsh on Alan Ritchson, but like in retrospect, this might be the best live action Aquaman we've had too, because like the Jason Momoa version it's a take. It's definitely a take that's not the comic book take. And this one isn't as much either, right? They're definitely both their own thing, but like, I don't know, like the more we're talking about, the more like the nostalgia is hitting me with it. And like, yeah, man, this was our first one. And like, I really liked it.
Yeah. And it captured a lot of, again, you don't get a lot of the backstory, but he talks about his father being the lighthouse keeper. He gets a swimming ability from his mother's side of the family, right? So we don't really delve fully into that, but that his mother died. I mean, you get the very broad strokes of all of this. They do make him a sophomore at the University of Miami, and he's on the swim team. And of course, he has to give that up at the end.
Which is funny. Like, I like that that's how they explain the orange and green color schemes, the Miami colors. Yeah. Which as a kid, through adulthood, I never understood why people thought this was such a weird color scheme. Like in the show, like, Lois is like, oh, it's orange and green. It's like, it's a very common color scheme in the real world. Like that a lot of sports teams use it. Like, I don't understand. Yeah. The Gatorade logo is orange and green. You know what I mean? Like, it's like literally like it's everywhere. Like, I don't understand why people have this huge, like, oh, your style's horrible with the orange and green. I'm like, really? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. But going back to, I guess, sort of the tension between them, well, I guess it manifests in a couple of ways. Clark is initially skeptical of him because at the beginning of the episode, right, Lois dives into the lake. She hits her head. She's injured. AC saves her, and Clark sees him underwater, and he swims faster than Clark does, and he's suspicious. And anyway, the episode unfolds. But when we get to this business about whether or not to blow up that lab, and Clark absorbs the blast and kind of takes AC to task for that, it's funny because flash forward to season 9, Clark will destroy the building that Zod has built to give them back. Like, he destroys a whole building. Like, it's a whole thing. So again, we're talking seasons apart here, but it was just kind of funny of like, you can't blow up this. I'm like, bro, you're gonna blow up a whole building. But I think, I guess what's especially new about AC, or what AC brings to the table, with Bart, it was very much this wayward kid who's stolen something he shouldn't have, and I'm going to try to set him straight. But with AC, it's really more of a team up. right? Where he's like surf and turf, and it's like, let's do this. It's like and he calls Lex a tool, which is great.
Yeah. I like when Rosenbaum's like, you called me a tool.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
What I thought was really funny in that episode, he is such a good actor, Michael Rosenbaum. Like that in that episode when Clark and AC go to confront Lex, like Clark's like, I know Lex, come with me and we'll go talk to him. And they go into his office, and that's when AC calls him a tool, and Michael Rosenbaum's like, I'm sorry, who are you again? Like it's like it's such a good, like, real kind of reaction to like what's going on, you know?
I know. Well, it's fun. You know, now we're at the point in the show from seasons 5 through 7 where, and especially this point in season 5 after Clark has punched Lex and they've had this whole thing where they'll still interact. Like Clark will continually barge into Lex's mansion, like, we need to talk. And Lex will have like a various series of those kind of responses about like, you know, why don't you try some small talk, Clark? It's like things like that. Yeah. You'll kind of be in that vein for a while, which is fun. But yeah, Rosenbaum did a great job. I mean, I don't know, it was interesting to see him again, torturing AC. It was, I don't know how to put it. It's like, obviously Lex has been on this downward trajectory for a while throughout his time, but I don't know, it was kind of darker than I would have thought for him, even at that point in time. Yeah.
That was kind of shocking to me going through, because like in my head, like I said, it's so anchored in those early seasons where they're friends. So I did forget how like quickly they actually did make him go kind of bad.
Yeah. But
what was whose episode was it where like the end of it, Clark was like, I'm glad to see you're alive, Lex. And he's like, oh, you actually made it sound. Was it the Martian Manhunter
That
episode?
was Labyrinth in season 6. Yeah, the Martian Manhunter episode where one of the Phantoms places Clark in this mental prison where he's in an asylum, and you know, essentially he's made to believe he's crazy and that he's invented all of this about his Kryptonian origin and his powers and everything, and that in reality he caused Lex's accident on the bridge and Lex lost his legs.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's this pretty chilling scene where Lex wheels himself out from behind the desk in his wheelchair and Clark sees he has no legs. And then at the end of the episode, in the real world, they encounter each other at the Talon. And Clark says, he's like, Lex, it's good to see you out and about.
Yeah.
And he's like, wow, sounds like you actually mean that, Clark. Yeah, that was a nice, I like that moment.
I've listened to the Talkville podcast. I'm very curious to see the reaction to that one, because I think he did a really good job acting in that one, Michael Rosenbaum, and I'm sure they'll pat themselves on the back for that.
Hey, Welling was so good in that episode. Like, Welling is very underrated. I feel like there are a number of episodes where
he's a really good actor. I think he's a very good actor. I think he gets I think what was asked of him as Superman, like for most of it, was very kind of like narrow, but when he does get to stretch, he definitely shows he's got a lot of range. Like I wish he would have like worked more, like be in more stuff, because like he's really good.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. Now, talking about live action Aquaman incarnations, did you watch the Justin Hartley pilot?
I actually own it on iTunes.
Yeah,
back in 2006 when they sold it on iTunes.
So a quick plug, Zach from Always Hold On to Smallville and I, we did an episode of my Patreon show all about it. We went through the whole thing. I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was fun. I liked your episode too, talking about it. It was really good.
And born out of the success of Aqua. Aqua did crazy ratings, and WB was like, oh, well, you know, we can explore this.
Do you think it did that because of Entourage?
I know, I wonder.
Because I actually wonder if, like, we were talking about how Green Arrow got lifted up in the show. Like, I wonder if, like, Entourage, which admittedly, like, I listened to Doug Ellen talk about this on his podcast. They did it as a joke because they thought it was like the worst superhero they could possibly pick. But then, like, in the show, they made it this super successful thing that James Cameron directed. So the perception of him was like, Aquaman's fucking awesome. And then like, so they put him in Smallville and people are like, this is great. Like, he's cool. Like,
and the like few seconds of the quote unquote Aquaman movie that you see on Entourage,
it looks good.
Vinny Chase, it's like, like, this looks good. You know, we laugh, but I don't know. There might be something to that when you have the character kind of in the conversation in a way that they haven't been before, consciously or not. I don't know. I feel like there's some sort of effect that happens.
I remember Wizard Magazine at the time having like a whole like article like asking comic book creators like, do you think Vinny Chase would make a good Aquaman? And it was like Jeff Johns and Brian Azzarello and all these guys like answering like, yeah, he would, or no, he wouldn't, you know, kind of thing. And like it definitely was a cultural impact for sure at the time.
And then, of course, AC has a line about the Junior Lifeguard Association, and Clark's like, I don't think I'm ready for the JLA just yet. All right. Do you like that stuff, or you kind of roll your eyes at it?
It can be a little much, I think.
Because I feel like it's for us.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it ever really has that. Because I kind of roll I'm like, I'm not offended by it. But it's just like, all right. Like,
well, I can tell you, my dad loves that. Like
right.
when we were watching, my dad was like, Justice League. Like, and I was like, I get it. Yeah. I get it.
And then the other big thing here, we have this, it's only one episode, so it only goes so far, but romance between AC and Lois.
Lois like gets around with like every member of the Justice League, right? In the show. Not Flash, but Aquaman, Green Arrow. Was there another one?
No,
just those two. Okay,
that's it.
I thought there was another one.
She has a romance with Grant Gabriel, her boss at the Daily Planet, who turns out to be the grown-up clone of baby Julian Luthor.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
So he has various relationships, but among the Justice League, it's really just these two. But it's the first instance of this, so I mention it. But I mean, I think this was a winning outing for the show and for the character of Aquaman.
Mm-hmm.
And just the fist bump at the end, stay super, bro. Man, it's because I guess the other thing too with this is just to see.
I like it. I like his personality, man. I do.
Yeah, I like his personality, and I guess I just like what it brings out in Clark, where generally, right, any superpowered individual he's going up against in the show, especially up until this point, primarily the meteor infected, right? And then in season 6 we'll get into the zoners and all that. But those are primarily the powered beings he's going up against, and on a day-to-day basis, he's dealing with a lot of people he has to hide from. And with these DC heroes, in some way, shape, or form, they all kind of figure out what his deal is pretty soon, so he doesn't have to hide. Yeah. Right. And they're on equal footing, more or less, even though they don't have the same powers or the same level of power, but like they can take care of themselves. So it's just like a different dynamic. Yeah. Which I think is cool to kind of open up for the character. All right. And then later in season 5, we have the Cyborg episode that introduces Victor, where the sympathetic doctor lets him out of this lab and he ends up getting hit by Lana Lang in her car and all of that. And I mostly said my piece about Victor earlier. I did like this football connection between the two of them, where Clark recognizes him. He's like, hey, played high school football. I like that.
Yeah. No, and this episode too, unlike the Flash and the Aquaman one, this one had a real like sort of emotional weight that with Lana involved as well. And so this one was less about like, because they couldn't really show Victor's powers per se, like his metal stuff. They went more with like the emotional weight of it it was less about the Flash and more about the substance with this. You know what I mean? It wasn't all about the spectacle, but more about like the emotional core of what the story was about. And I feel like that is why I think this one was really good. I liked.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if our central thesis is that each of these encounters with DC heroes highlights something along Clark's journey. What is it in this case? Here, we catch up with Clark really at a low, dark point. This is after Jonathan has died. This is after he had told Lana his secret and she had accepted him and accepted his marriage proposal. But then, of course, he undid that with his time do-over crystal. And now he's once again in this relationship where he's perpetually hiding his secret from her, lying to her. And it's really putting this increasing strain on the relationship. Like, that's where we catch up with them at this point. And so, yeah, what this highlights is you have Victor, who is apprehensive about sharing what's happened to him with his girlfriend, but ultimately does. Yet Clark remains unable to take that step with Lana. And I mentioned this in another episode. There was this whole stretch from Reckoning through Hypnotic, those few episodes where I swear to God, every episode ended, it felt like, with Clark and Lana breaking up. Where even at the end of Cyborg, they acknowledge, like, this is essentially not working. And she's like, do you even still love me? And, and he says yes, right? I mean, he must at that point. At that point, he does. But still, it just felt like episode after episode, they really seem to be acknowledging this is not working, but they're still hanging in there. So, yeah, I mean, I think at this point, it was more about the heart, like you said, the emotional side and kind of the relationship parallel in this instance.
Yeah.
But see, what's interesting too, this is what I wanted to say. We talked about this when we did our Lex episode. For a number of seasons, in the background, right, there was this whole idea of level 33.1, Lex is experimenting on the Meteor Freaks. That's where he brings Mikhail at the end of the Mixie episode. And
we never see it, do we?
Thank you. So, and then there's the that subterranean episode in season 6 with like the farmer on a neighboring farm who has powers. And at the end of it, you probably remember the very last scene of this where that meteor freak is strapped down and Lex tells the doctor to, continue experimenting on him. And then Lex is walking through the hallway and all the hands of the meteor freaks who are locked up are like reaching through. Yeah. Right. But that's about as much as we ever see of it. And so it's one of these things where it's like Lex is experimenting on them in the background and you get only these fleeting glimpses of it. But I think that's why something like Cyborg, even though, again, I don't necessarily love that Lex is kind of is inserted into Victor's origin story, but I do kind of like that you get to see, because you don't get to see Lex really in level 33.1, but you get to see him ordering these experiments on Victor. So you get to see that side of him and really kind of how dark things have gotten. So I like that aspect of it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I totally forgot about that 33.1 thing because like that was a huge part of those early seasons, and like the fact that it never gets paid off is like kind of crazy,
I know. I complained about this in our Lex episode last week. It's like it would have been so cool because one of my favorite episodes is Asylum in season 3 when Lex is in the asylum. Lionel has made him crazy and is going to subject him to electroshock therapy. But they bring back 3 past villains from episodes and they team up against Clark. It's like, this is great. Like, do that. Do more of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Aw Yeah Comics celebrates and promotes everything that is wonderful about comics, toys, artwork, and the joy they bring to people. Visit them in person at one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, aka my local comic shop, Skokie, Illinois, or Muncie, Indiana. If you have kids and have been looking for a family-friendly store, look no further. Join Aw Yeah for exciting events, including creator signings, how-tos, and more. Visit awyeahcomics.com and follow Aw Yeah on social media for more. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw Yeah. Filmmakers and movie fans alike should be sure to attend these film festivals: Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, Point Lookout on Long Island, and Round Reel in Bloomfield, New Jersey. Take it from an alum of 2 of them. Submission information for filmmakers, as well as details about the festivals, can be found at filmfreeway.com. Follow the festivals on social media for news about events, discounts, tickets, and more. Also, listen to the Hang On to Your Shorts and Cullen on Film podcasts available via a shared universe network. What's fun, especially with Lex in these episodes, I think you see him, really in Justice and Aqua in particular, right? And Cyborg too. You see him at his most like comic book villain Lex in a great way. The line in Justice when Bart's like, I want to get out of here. He's like, and I want a ponytail. Disappointment abounds. It's like, it's great. It's so such a good line.
That was so good. Yeah.
And I want a ponytail. So we move now into season 6. We're into the second half of the series here. And of course, the main thrust of season 6 is Clark has inadvertently let these Phantom Zoners escape, right? When he himself escaped the Phantom Zone at the start of the season. So that's kind of the main driver for Clark for most of the season. He's got to track down these zoners. But season 6 introduces Oliver Queen as Green Arrow. We see him as early as the second episode, Sneeze, and then his role starts to grow. But I did rewatch the episode Arrow, the 4th episode of the season, where you really see him in all of his Arrow glory. And it's very Robin Hood-esque. Yeah. Where he is robbing from the rich and specifically items that have been stolen or purchased on the black market. And he, in that opening scene, steals this very fancy necklace that Lionel has lent to Senator Martha Kent. And so that's kind of our inciting incident that brings the characters into conflict. But yeah, what'd you think about all that?
I loved it, dude. I love the Robin Hood analogy because I feel like that was the basis of the character to begin with. And like originally in the comics, right? He's supposed to be like a modern Robin Hood. And yeah, I think it totally worked. It worked with the personality that they've given him. They gave him in the 70s, the very sort of like bleeding heart kind of like personality that they kind of pushed in his direction. I think it totally works with what they did in the show. And like we said, Justin Hartley is so good in this, and the costume looks good. And like, yeah, everything about the Arrow stuff I think is really good, especially that first appearance of him.
You like the sunglasses?
I don't mind it. It's strange at night to have sunglasses, right? Like the practicality of it. But like in my head, they're not sunglasses. They're like tactical goggles that's like lit up. And like, if you see his vision, it's almost like Predator vision, like with the heat thermals and stuff. Like, but like, I don't mind the sunglasses.
Yeah, overall, so this is where, again, we meet him even a couple episodes prior to this, but this is when we get the full-fledged, Green Arrow bandit debut, as he's initially coined. And so he has a fairly significant arc in season 6, culminating with Justice. He'll come back for that one episode, Siren, in season 7 that introduces Black Canary. And then Justin Hartley will be a regular on the show from seasons 8 through 10. So, Ollie gets
Wait, he was only in season 7, he was only in one episode?
Just the one episode.
Wait, really?
Yeah. I think he's probably referenced more than that, but he's only in that one.
He only appeared in one episode in season 7.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't realize that. Because in my head, my memory of it is he shows up and then he's just in the show.
No, yeah, he leaves after Justice in the middle of season 6, and then just the one pop in season 7. But then again, he's there for 8 through 10.
Yeah.
So he certainly gets a lot of play.
And he's on the credits, the opening credits. Yeah.
And unlike Bart, AC, and Victor, again, he comes in with a costume. I mean, this is big for the show. It's interesting, and I have not tracked this, but I know there are at least some instances where he's using a proper bow and arrow. But then there are
mostly
a lot of
the
times
crossbow.
the crossbow.
Yeah.
I'm the biggest fan of that.
Yeah, it's funny because at the time, because I just thought it was me and my friends thought it was just so cool, Green Arrow's on the show, and a lot of my friends didn't know who the character was. They're just like, dude, this Arrow guy's awesome. He's cool, and he's got a crossbow, a tech crossbow and stuff. Yeah, but he never really does use the longbow, really, does he?
No, I mean, there are at least some, because in all this rewatching, there were a couple of instances where I'm okay, there we go. But yeah, and a lot of times it really is just the
But in Justice, for example, the Justice Society, when he's tracking Stargirl, he doesn't have any bow. He's just kind of running on the rooftops. And I did notice that. I'm that's kind of strange. It doesn't, because the show Arrow, he always had the bow, with him all the time, which he should.
Yeah.
It's his thing. Yeah.
I mean, overall, again, I like this take a lot. I think it's very much what they would have done had they been able to use Bruce Wayne on the show. The whole stealing from the rich, giving to the poor, because that's the whole thing. He steals and then he makes these huge charitable donations. So yes, very Robin Hood-esque. And yes, to your point, that does tie in with what we kind of know of the character from the comics, that he is this bleeding heart liberal, right? And kind of championing those causes. I don't know that the show ever really committed to that. I feel like, especially after this, I mean, I'm sure there are instances here and there where he'll drop a line or something, but it's not the main thrust of his character, which is fine. It doesn't necessarily need to be, but at least there was some attempt to kind of get at that idea here.
Yeah. I do think it's funny that not only that first episode, but all his subsequent appearances, everything about him as Oliver Queen is coated with arrows and green stuff. And I'm it's kind of crazy that his office has a big crest with a green crest with an arrow on it, and dude, really?
Well, and he wears the necklace with the ring with the crest engraved in it, and that's how they're able to identify him. It's all right. I did love because this is the episode, even though he's been in play and he's already embarked on this romantic relationship with Lois, early stages of it. But this episode, Arrow, is where Clark and Ollie meet for the first time, and you get that official handshake between the two of them. Because Ollie has that whole remark about how when he sees Clark, he's like, oh, based on what Lois said, I was expecting someone a lot different.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah. Because he doesn't, he doesn't interact with Clark until then.
Yeah. But they really, I have to say, the show really committed to the costume, the set. I mean, his whole loft set.
Yeah. It's cool.
And his musical theme, which I wish I could even hum, but you guys know what I'm talking about. And it's throughout, even in his final scene in the series finale, when he's looking up at the blur in the sky. And you get the few notes of that. So I like that theme.
I actually I can't pull it off the top of my head. I'm not aware of that one. But I do like everything they did with him, though. It was really cool.
Yeah. And I guess talking about kind of what the character brings out and what Clark is able to bring to the table himself. I think with the two of them in this episode, and I think even as we're moving forward, so much of it is that Clark has this very black and white sense of what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
Whereas for Ollie, I think he definitely sees more of those shades of gray. Even talking about these, these stolen pieces, right? From Clark's perspective, it's well, you stole these, you have to give them back. And Oliver makes the whole point of well, these were, again, purchased on the black market, including that necklace that Lionel lent to Martha. And that final exchange in the barn where he's well, you seem to have all the answers. You seem to know what the right thing to do is. And then he's you decide what to do. And Clark's well, it doesn't seem as clear anymore, or something to that effect. So again, I think just an important kind of lesson of there's different ways to kind of approach these.
I do because all the other characters by the end of their episode are usually falling in line with Clark, right? Whereas he doesn't. he is like very much like, yeah, you're a good dude and you can do cool stuff, but like, that doesn't mean you're right about everything. And like, I think I'm right. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and that's kind of cool. They push that character in that direction, you know?
Yeah. And then again, this whole line, and we've quoted it multiple times already, but this whole line about there's a whole world out there, right? I think that's other than seeing the shades of gray, I think that's the other key piece with Oliver is that Clark has not been proactive. He helps the people in his life. He helps his friends and family when trouble shows up at his doorstep, but he's not going out there looking for it yet at this point in his journey, especially in this dropout era of the show. And so Oliver really kind of brings that home and essentially says, like, when you're ready to do something about it, like, come find me.
Yeah. Which side note, you bring up the dropout thing. I just want to talk about this very briefly. I think it's very odd that they didn't have him go through 4 years of college, because I feel like it would have maintained the feel of seasons 1 through 4 had he still been in school and college. Just an observation.
I could not agree more. It's odd to me. And I feel like had this been their plan to really show that he's kind of, again, holding on to his life on the farm, he's more isolated, that's one thing. I don't think that was their intention. I think that's just kind of what ended up happening.
Yeah.
And then the show commented upon that in season 8. But yeah, it would have just brought him into contact with more people in a more organic way.
It would have explained the journalism thing too a little way better. Like, if he gets an internship and then, you know what I mean? Like,
that's the thing. Like, you could have had, I mean, look, and I've watched that whole Superboy TV series, and especially in that first season when he and TJ are working at the Schuster Herald, like, that's a major kind of engine for storytelling. It's like they're working on a story, and then that necessitates Superboy's intervention.
Yeah.
Had he been working for his college newspaper, it's like that could have been an engine for storytelling where he's investigating something. It's so odd to me. And especially they had their college location, because he was there for half a season, and they could have just continued to build that out. And I don't think the world would have felt as small as it did. Yeah.
Well, I'm surprised they didn't have him go to Metropolis for college, because I know they had him going to like a community college, but like, I'm surprised they just didn't have him go to like Metropolis University, you know what I mean? And like, and still have him come back to like, he could run back and forth, you know, like it's just like going back, listening to your episodes. I just didn't want to forget to bring that up, because I'm like, that is really weird that they didn't like keep him in school, because it would have maintained the feel of the show.
Yeah.
Very strange.
I know. I don't get that. Like, it's kind of perplexing. And just to highlighting kind of the differences between them and kind of this notion of the Lois romance. So they're in this relationship, but during season 6, she does not know that Oliver is the Green Arrow. And it really all comes to a head in that Justice episode where, and I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but just kind of on this thread of Lois and Ollie. And overall, I have to say, I like this pairing. They clearly have chemistry, and I think it was kind of an interesting forerunner to what would become the Lois and Clark relationship, to kind of see how she handles this and how she reacts. I think it was kind of illuminating. But in that Justice episode, Ollie continually has to run off, and it's putting a strain, right? She has this whole line about, I feel like we're all interruptus and no coitus, that whole bit. And in the end, he has to leave, right? Because he and his team, they have their mission, and it's this, very sad farewell between the two of them. And when Ollie and Clark reunite in season 7, this is at the point in time where Clark is just living on the farm with Lana. Mm-hmm. And Ollie really kind of gives it to him. He's like, I gave up the person I wanted to help to save the world.
Yeah.
Right. And so again, I think just kind of in that love life, department, I think important to kind of highlight, that side of things and kind of that sacrifice that Oliver was willing to make that he felt Clark wasn't. So
yeah,
just interesting. But did you like that Ollie Lois pairing?
I mean, I'm trying to think when I first watched it. Like, I mean, I just kind of felt it was like a standard kind of CW kind of trope that they were going for. I think it went on a little too long, because she all the way up through Canary, right? That's when she finds out that he is.
Yeah. So I mean, essentially, they break up at the end of Justice, and then he's gone. And then when he shows back up, and Canary ties them up, and she uses her siren cry. Yeah. It shatters the glass that's hiding all of his Arrow paraphernalia. And so that's when Lois realizes that Ollie is the Green Arrow. So that's when she finds out in that season 7 episode.
Yeah. Yeah. No, because, I forgot that, obviously on Real Time, everyone heard that I forgot that he left the show. So like in my head watching this, I'm like, damn, he was dating her for a really long time in this. But I guess that wasn't the case. So yeah, I mean, I I didn't find it offensive. I mean, I didn't think it was like, I want this to be like the status quo, but I didn't think it was like bad. Like, were you offended by it?
No, I mean, it's funny. I wonder if I had more of a reaction at the time. I don't know. I don't really remember feeling that strongly about it. I think I probably felt kind of like you were saying, like it's kind of par for the course for a CW show.
Yeah.
I think that's probably what my feeling was. And I guess too, it just didn't seem like we were getting it. I don't know. I don't know that it felt like it was taking away from Lois and Clark because we were just not in that zone at all.
Which, side note, like, I don't remember, because I remember it feeling very strange, the Lois and Clark like romance in that show. Like, it felt like it like was not there at all, and then all of a sudden it just happened. And was that kind of your recollection of it? Okay, yeah.
Basically, I think it was at the point where it's like, well, so many people have left the show, and this is where we are now, and we're going to do this. But I think all of us were just like, all right, like we're on board. Let's go down this road. But on the note of Lois and Oliver, when Justin Hartley was on Rosenbaum's Inside of You podcast, well, like a couple of years ago at this point now, but he talked about how there were talks at some point of a Metropolis spinoff with Ollie and Lois.
Really?
Yeah.
Like after the show ended?
I don't know if it would have been fully after, or if they would have left like during season 6 or season 7 for the spinoff. That was a little bit unclear. I'm glad we didn't go down that road.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what that looks like then. I mean, I feel like then Lois really, I don't know, then Lois and Ollie really becomes a whole other thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like where this landed was appropriate. And to kind of button up the Lois and Ollie piece in that Siren episode, after she discovers the secret, you see her make this very valiant attempt to preserve Ollie's secret when Clark and Chloe show up, and she's like, "Oh, can you believe like he's into archery?" Like she's trying to play it off, and obviously Clark and Chloe know that Ollie is Green Arrow, but just to see the lengths that Lois would go to, despite how upset she is about all of this, that Oliver hid this from her, like she still tries to protect him.
Well, yeah, that line that she said, like, "Oh, dork, your hobby." I'm like, much like the orange and green thing about Aquaman. I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, I don't really think archery is like a dorky hobby. Like, I don't know. It's pretty
badass.
It's badass. It's a sport. It's something that takes a lot of skill. Like, I don't know.
I know. But, and at the end of Siren, just on this Lois and Oliver note, he wants to make it work now that she knows the secret, but she says no, right? She can't share him with the world, essentially, which is interesting. Obviously, we know she'll get to that place with Clark in the end. But it was just kind of interesting to see how she kind of received all of this at this point in her journey.
Yeah.
I think we're at the point of justice.
The culmination of all of them.
Yeah. Where Bart comes back. He's been breaking into these Luthor Corp facilities. He gets abducted. Yeah.
What did you think of their costumes?
For the time, fine, right? They're in their colors, like Aquaman's in his orange and green, and Bart's in his red, and we lean into the hoods and the glasses, which I could have done without.
Yeah, I could have. So I think the hood and the sunglasses works really good for Green Arrow because that's kind of what his costume looks like. It's supposed to look like. For the other characters, like I kind of hate that they just took his costume and just palette swapped them.
Yes,
like
I agree with that,
and I kind of hate that. Like I'm not saying I wanted them to like be in their full on superhero costumes, but like. Maybe Bart had like a backwards hat or something, or maybe he had like a hoodie, like something that was like different, like different enough that didn't look like they just palette swapped his costume,
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. But even with all of that, of course, we have AC and Victor reveal that they've been working for Oliver as well. And they all unite to try to rescue Bart from this Luthor Corp facility. Because again, they've been breaking in, they've been stealing this 33.1 data, and now they're going to try to destroy the mainframe with all of this information. And just to kind of have them all together like that, again, at the time,
it was pretty wild.
Had instances of characters coming back, like multiple characters in one episode. It was reminiscent of that Asylum episode. We had multiple past Meteor Freaks coming back. It's like, oh, this is so cool. Like this was truly an event.
This was an event. I remember I was a freshman in college when this aired, and I remember like me and my roommates watching. My roommates were making fun of me for it because when I was in college, I got made fun of for watching Smallville. But they all watched it with me. They were all like, when they were like, okay, let's go. Justice League, pretty cool. Like.
Yeah,
it was an event, man. It was cool. It was really cool. And like, I'm sure people who are younger listening to this now, like think it might view it as quaint or whatever, but it was a big deal when it aired.
Yeah. And look, they all had their part to play. in terms of breaking in and downloading the data and planting the explosives and rescuing Bart. Like they all had their part to play in it. And Chloe as well, right? Assuming that watchtower role that then will become her primary function in the later seasons of the show. I think that one of the things that I love the most about this, I mean, I love that shot of them walking away from the explosion. Iconic.
Yeah.
But the thing that I love before that is when Clark realizes that one of Oliver's objectives is to destroy the plant, right? It's not just about stealing the information, rescuing Bart. He's going to blow up the plant. And we know how Clark feels about blowing stuff up, right? Going back to Aqua, that's a no-no. So Clark's initially resistant to this, but he comes around. But what I like is that he's Clark. He's the most powerful one there. If he says no, they're not doing that. So I mean, maybe I'm just reading into this, but I feel like there's a level of deference there that Oliver gives him that he kind of like has to. It's like at the end of the day, if Clark wants to shut this down, he can.
Yeah.
But he doesn't. And all I could think of was like, what do you think was going through Clark's head at that point? Because I feel like Clark was like F-Lex. Like, I'm gonna blow this up.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
It's like he stole Lana. Like, he's investigated me. Yeah. It's like, nah, blow this up.
Totally. 100%, dude. 100%.
And of course, he makes sure that everyone is out. Right? He's like, are you 100% sure everyone's out? She's like, yes. So obviously, he's still taking everyone else into account. But I love that.
Was this the first time Cyborg was on the Justice League?
Oh, that's such a good question. You know, I was thinking about that because in recent years, right, historically, Cyborg was this Teen Titans character, or then the Titans. But in recent years, we've seen this big push across media, really, to make Cyborg more prominent, to make him a member of the Justice League. We saw it in the New 52 reboot and in the movie, certainly.
Also the cartoons that were kind of aligned with the New 52.
Yes.
The animated cartoons, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think this was, certainly a very early instance, if not the first instance. I was thinking about that.
I think this might have been the first time, yeah.
Look, our pal Zach, he's fond of saying Smallville is the blueprint.
Yeah.
And, we see a number of instances of that. I think Smallville really paved the way in a lot of respects, and just kind of realizing these characters on screen, and regardless of what other directions they would go in other stories, it's like, it's really something to that.
Yeah, yeah. And I love this version of Cyborg, man. Like, I do. I mean, I know visuals notwithstanding with the metal and stuff, but like Lee Thompson, great actor to play him. Yeah. Like, he brought a lot of heart, made him really cool, really relatable. Like, yeah, I when I was watching all these episodes, I was telling my wife, I was like, this might be the best version of all these characters. Like, I know I said that about the Flash, but like about all of them kind of across the board. Like,
I really liked Cyborg in the Snyder cut of Justice League.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That was strong. I'm not broken and I'm not alone. Like all that, and just the visual representation of his abilities. And like that was. But no, this was great, and I love the banter between AC and Victor. When AC is shirtless, he's like, I swim better naked. He's like, you're lucky I have pants on. So no, I mean, like, it's so fun. But then we get that final scene in the barn as they're leaving, because they're going to go track down other Luthor Corp facilities and everything. And they want Clark to come. Oliver's like, join us. And Clark's like, I want to, but there's this problem I caused that I have to, the show always giving a reason to hold Clark back, right? He's got to round up these zoners. I mean, I don't know. Do you feel like Clark would have gone?
But I mean, don't you, wouldn't he be like, hey, team, you want to help me round up these zoners? Let's accomplish both of our objectives. Like, I mean, obviously there's a reason, like the show would have just changed. Like, would have become like,
I know.
The Justice League show. Like,
it's funny because here Clark gives a reason. He articulates a reason why he can't go. Fair enough. But then when you get to the Siren episode with Black Canary, she and Ollie are walking off at the end. And again, it's the same sort of thing. Like, Clark, come with us. And at this point, he's just, I forget the exact line, but he's just basically like, no.
Yeah.
Which it's okay. Like, now we're not even going to try to muster a reason why. So, like we say always all the time with the show,
I still have
one step forward, 2 steps back.
I still have lots to handle here on the farm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was just to have them all together and come on boys, let's go save the world. And they're walking out together. Oh man, it's great.
Yeah, that was just so good.
I mean,
so
another almost spinoff. I know that was another rumor that there was some
the
attempt.
Justice League?
Yeah, I think Stephen DeKnight, who wrote this episode, I think he had talked about there was some sort of attempt, or again, I think there was a lot of stuff over the years that there were talks of.
Yeah.
Obviously, the thing that got closest was the Aquaman, not spinoff, right? Because as we talked about, it was kind of this occupy this weird space where.
Well, that was before Justin Hartley was on Smallville.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after that Aqua episode, WB's, we got to do an Aquaman show, but they didn't cast Alan Ritchson, right? There's another actor, Will Toll, who they replaced him with Justin Hartley. And then the pilot didn't move forward. And it was this weird thing where.
It's a good pilot. I'm really surprised it didn't go forward.
I think had the WB and UPN not merged to form the CW, because that was the season, I think it would have been picked up.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
But it was from Alan Miles and it was very much in that Smallville vein and felt very Smallville-esque, yet wasn't necessarily in the same universe, yet they talked about how the door was open for crossovers down the line. So I don't know what space it would have occupied. But then they brought Justin Hartley in as Ollie. And
very strange that they didn't cast Alan Ritchson in that. Very, very strange that he wasn't even like talked about for it. Cause
well, it's especially weird when you think about if the success of the Aqua episode was such a big driver for them. It's like, well, he was the guy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very, very, very weird. Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, I mean, a Justice League show, I mean, could have, I don't know. It would have been intriguing.
Yeah. Would have been cool.
You look at the life of Smallville, whether it was Aquaman, this Metropolis spinoff, Justice League, Supergirl, like a lot of instances where we could have gone into spinoff territory and we didn't. And
was Supergirl one they were talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's come up before, that there was at least some idea of doing so. I mean, I think always when they would bring in these characters, I'm sure there was at least some inclination of, in success, right, they could do more.
Yeah,
I don't know how far any of this ever got, but these are all things that have kind of come up over the years. And there's a part of me that's like, it would have been cool to have a Smallville spinoff. But then there's something else. I think the bigger part of me is like, you know what? I'm glad it was just Smallville.
Yeah, no, I am too, in retrospect, for sure. Because like the Arrow universe, we see how like Arrow was cool and Flash is cool, but like it just kind of spun way too far out. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm glad that it was just this. Because I think, especially if it had been Lois leaving the show, like we would have taken away.
That would have been really weird, yeah.
And then we mentioned him, but Martian Manhunter, I think after Ollie, he's the DC hero who gets the most play over the series, because he pops up a bunch of times.
Yeah.
He's teased. There's the episode Static. I think that's the one with Dave Bautista, where he's teased. You don't see his face, but you just kind of see the shadowy figure. He's one of the Phantom Zoners.
I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, okay. Or very early acting role.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But then this Labyrinth episode that we've talked about, where Clark is in this mental prison, sent there by the Phantom. That's where John Jones first reveals himself.
Yeah.
And then he'll pop up again at the end of season 6 and beginning of season 7. And essentially what we find out is he worked for Jor-El, right? He brought fugitives to justice. He was the Manhunter.
Yeah. And
Jor-El tasked him with keeping an eye on Clark. But was instructed to really stay away and only intervene if absolutely necessary. Yeah, because I think it's in season 6 in the finale where Clark's like, "Where have you been?" All this
time. Where were you when I was strung up on that cornfield?
But you like this take on, and so this Martian Manhunter, he'll go through. I forget offhand exactly how many appearances he makes. It's like a good half a dozen or more over the course of the those final seasons. And there will come a point where he loses his powers. He becomes a cop. He's later restored by Dr. Fate in the Justice Society episode. But just big picture, what was your kind of take on?
Well, I mean, I really like the actor who played him, because he came off as very alien-like. You know what I mean? And the way he like talked, he was very like, he's just off. Like he didn't feel like natural. You know what I mean? And I know that I'm assuming that was on purpose to make him feel like like a Martian, right? And he was really cool with that. And did they ever show him with the green skin? And the cape and everything? I believe
the only time is in the Justice Society episode when Dr. Fate is like, "Your fate is not to die today," and he shoves him.
Yeah.
And there's like the portal around him, and you see him flash to his green form for like a second.
Okay.
I think that's it.
So but you never see him like with the cape manifest and stuff, right? Like
no.
Okay. Yeah.
Look, they did what they.
Yeah.
And you know what? I think that was for the best.
Where did I see that? Was that in Zack Snyder's Justice League where he like transforms in the Cape Manifesto? Okay, because I was like, I know I saw that somewhere. Like
that's when he impersonates Martha. It's
yeah.
the one thing about that Snyder cut that I'm like, why'd you do that? Anyway, that's a separate conversation that we've already had. But no, I loved Phil Morris as John Jones, and what was cool about it was we've talked a lot about Jor-El and this very fraught relationship that Clark has with AI Jor-El. And what you get in the form of John Jones is a far warmer stand-in for Jor-El and this mentor figure. And again, this is a very different vibe and dynamic than we've seen with the other heroes, where they're contemporaries, where they're earlier in their journeys. I mean, this again is a fully formed Martian Manhunter who's there to kind of help be this guide for Clark. And we've talked about this scene before, and I've quoted it a lot, so I'll go quickly on this. But at the start of season 8, Odyssey, when Clark is powerless and he's been shot and he's on the verge of death, and John Jones shows up and he flies Clark into the sun and restores him, because that's always the way. But that costs John Jones his powers, right? And so he's powerless for a while until he's restored by Dr. Fate. But after Clark wakes up in the barn, there's that scene between the two of them, and I've talked about Clark's side of it, where he goes on about how I've been holding on to this life on the farm. I need to let it go. But John Jones's line there, he's like, your father knew he was sending you on an impossible odyssey, right? To be given the powers of a god, yet live among humans. I just love that idea of an impossible odyssey. I feel like kind of encapsulates so much about Clark and this story. Like it is an impossible odyssey. I always use that analogy of Jor-El makes the ultimate Hail Mary pass across the stars when he shoots off that rocket. And then Jonathan Kent does the most impossible thing, catches it. Like, it's amazing. It is an impossible odyssey. So I love that line, and I love that interaction between the two of them.
Yeah.
And he showed, for a while, end of season 6, beginning of season 7, beginning of season 8, like there was this run of him kind of showing up at these pivotal points in the show to kind of offer some sort of counsel. I like that.
Yeah, he felt very mature. He felt like he was the big brother to Clark.
And this podcast is made possible by the support of our Patreon community. Sign up for a monthly or annual membership at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato and choose from a range of rewards. This week, I want to spotlight our Super Friend tier, aka our sponsorship package. Promote your comic shop, convention, creative project, website, or anything else you want to spread the word about. Sign up today, and thank you to all patrons. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show, too. I think I've said kind of everything I wanted to say about Black Canary. I don't know if you have anything else about that character.
I don't have too much more to say about Black Canary, because I felt like it was probably the weakest one, I thought,
Yeah. It's funny because they make her this conservative journalist. And it's like very different now, right, than it was at the time, right? Just taking into account the current climate, which is, it's weird. I feel like, and I'm not a Black Canary expert by any means. I've read a fair share of Birds of Prey, but I don't know if that sort of political leaning is in any way part of her history.
I don't remember that. But again, I'm not an expert in Black Canary either,
what's weird about it is typically that's what you get with Hawkman and Green Arrow. It's the left wing, right wing. But here they sort of transposed that onto Black Canary. Like it was just a weird. I found the Black Canary episode odd.
Did they do it just because like they knew Black Canary and Green Arrow are the ones who end up together, and like that's like
except here.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Well, no, don't you see? Chloe's really going to become Black Canary.
That's a perfect segue onto the Legion and Zatanna episodes here. So we're now in the final era of the show. And like we said, this is where I think these hero introductions, they'll get more comic booky.
Yeah, way more.
We'll kind of move beyond proto costumes and hoods, and we'll see characters looking a lot more like you would see them on the page. And Clark obviously is at a very different point in his journey. Now he's taken these proactive steps, and he's working at the planet, and he's patrolling, and he's more confident, he's more assertive.
Yeah.
And that interesting to see how that plays out. But yeah, this Legion episode written by Jeff Johns. What was your take on this?
It was cool to see the Legion characters. Because like I hadn't watched this probably since it aired, so it was cool to like revisit it. this is where their look is like halfway between like a proto costume and like a real costume. You know what I mean? Which I kind of wish they pushed it one way or the other more so. You know what I mean? For their look. I mean, I kind of wish they went less honest to be honest with you. Like, but yeah, I thought it was really good. It was a fun episode, and it was cool to see like how they're always like, particularly the guy who plays Cosmic Boy, like the way they portray him, like giving those like epic statements to Clark, like your influence will reach far beyond like Earth, you know, like very, very cool lines they gave Cosmic Boy for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think especially when we look at this like final batch of hero introductions, I think with the Legion and their knowledge of the future, when we get to the JSA episodes, Dr. Fate's knowledge of what's to come, and then Booster and his knowledge of what's to come.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of these introductions, as we're in the final leg of Clark's journey, become a lot more pointed about what he's going to do or what he has the potential to do in a grander way than we've experienced before. And it's this interesting thing. And we did a lot talking about Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes and this weird paradox that Clark inspires the Legion, yet it's his time with them that makes him the kind of hero that could inspire them. It's, you know, from a kind of time paradox point of view. It's a little hard to kind of reconcile sometimes, but I'm a big fan of this episode, and my appreciation for the Legion has obviously grown a lot with all the stuff that we've covered. But even
Legion's great. Legion's a really cool concept.
Yeah, I've come around on it in a big way. But like even at the time, I like this. This is a sweet spot for me. Like the notion that they come back to the past. That he's not necessarily flying around with them in the future, but they come back to the past, and they give him kind of like they give him enough to sort of, you know, encourage him on this path that he's undertaken, right? Without giving away too much, but kind of hinting at the bigger picture. And not erasing his memory like we got in the animated series, which always bothered me. It's because it's a very similar type of thing. But then they
same three characters?
I forget offhand. I think so. They might have subbed out one, but I just can't remember offhand that Superman the Animated Series episode. But yeah, I mean, here we get Cosmic Boy, Saturn Girl, and Lightning Lad.
Core 3.
And they get Core 3 classic. And they show up to save Clark from the Persuader, who's traveled back in time to try to kill Clark. But what they find out is that Persuader, or in the battle, the Phantom Zone crystal was damaged. And that's what Clark was meant to use to stop Brainiac. So now this is what keeps them around, right? They need to stop Brainiac. Otherwise, could have major ramifications to the timeline. And of course, this is right after the Bride episode where Doomsday had attacked and taken Chloe off. And now Chloe is infected by and possessed by Brainiac, which I have to say, Chloe in that bloody wedding gown doing the Brainiac bit, so creepy. Like, it was great.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah, it was really creepy, yeah.
And there were times where Allison Mack was very, very clearly channeling James Marsters. Like, there were a couple of bits where I was like, oh, you could really see what she was doing there.
Yeah, for sure. And the stinger at the end when they get them in Cosmic Boy is like, let's hope Brainiac 5 will be a lot nicer than Brainiac 4. That's a good stinger.
Let me just say, because I don't actually think I've said this in any of our episodes so far, on the note of Allison Mack, right? Scandal noted. One of the things I didn't know how I would feel going into this rewatch is like, would I be able to separate the art from the artist? Always an ongoing question and conversation, right? Whether and to what extent one should do that. And I have to say, for the most part, I mean, does it cross my mind from time to time? Yes. I'd be lying if I said it didn't.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
But while she is a prominent character, it's not like it was Tom Welling, right?
Yeah.
So it's like I focus on the other characters. But even on the Chloe front, it was so long ago. Like I think because of the passage of time, I'm able to somewhat more easily kind of separate and like really look at them as two different people. So all that to say, it hasn't taken me out of it, really for the most part. And I'm happy to report that, because it would be awful if my favorite show were rendered unwatchable by the real world actions of this actor.
Yeah.
But this is what I love about the Legion episode. The Legion kind of functions as a stand-in for the fans, right? Because what do they talk about? Like, Clark doesn't live up to their expectations. Lightning Lad says, no glasses, no flights, no tights.
Yeah. That was a funny line, yeah.
Right? And they have this whole conversation about Chloe, because they know Lana Lang, they know Jimmy Olsen, they know Lois Lane. Like, no one's ever heard of Chloe Sullivan. And this is one of the things as fans this original character created for the show, who I know she would eventually pop up in the comics later on, and then they ended up not doing much with her, probably because of what happened in the real life. But
when did she show up in the comics? I don't remember that.
It was fleeting. It was very minimal, but I think she was
New 52 or before New 52?
I'd have to double check. Okay. I don't know offhand, but it might have been New 52. I'm not sure. It might have been right before. But audience, if you know, please let me know. But that was always the thing. It's like, well, what becomes of Chloe, right? If we're going to line up with the official mythology, it's like, what happens to her? And the Legion speculates. They kind of run through the scenarios that fans had talked about. It's like, does she die? Like, does her death inspire Clark to finally take flight? Does she change her name?
Yeah.
Right. For a long time, there was this theory that Chloe was going to become Lois, or potentially another character.
I had never heard that until you talked about it on this podcast, and I was like, that was really a thing people thought. Like that never even crossed my mind watching the show when I was growing up. Like, that's crazy.
So that was a theory. It was never one that I subscribed to. I mean, clearly she had, from the jump, she had a lot of attributes typically associated with Lois Lane, right? So I do understand the tenacity, the journalistic, interest.
Yeah.
So I get that. And I mean, they toyed with it. There was an episode in one of the early seasons when she used the name Lois, right? She needed a pen name, and she's like, I'll use my cousin's name. She's not interested in journalism. I mean, very recently, because I think it came out during Talkville when Alan Miles were on, and they did acknowledge that they considered that at some point.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I couldn't be happier that they didn't. Put real world stuff aside. And I talked about this with the relationships episode. It's like, it was never really there. I never saw it really with Clark and Chloe.
They didn't push it enough, I thought. I thought they could have mined a whole season out of it if they actually went that way, but they never did. It was like they went on like one date and then it was like over, and that was it. Yeah.
But so one of my favorite things about this episode is we get a couple of badass Clark moments. And when Lightning Lad is saying, like, maybe Chloe dies, and Clark turns around and grabs him.
Yeah.
He's like, Chloe Sullivan doesn't die.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah.
That was great. And then, of course, the big moment, and I've quoted this before. I think this was one of my top 10 moments when we did that episode. But when the Legion is prepared to kill Chloe, possessed by Brainiac, because they think that's the only way. And Clark stops him. And he turns to Rock, and he's like, does your Legion have any principles? You speak of a code, but if it had anything to do with me, rule number 1 would be do not kill, ever.
Yeah.
And my favorite part of this, he's like, if you ever believed in me, and even if you don't now, help me. I love it. It's one of my favorite moments.
It's a good moment for sure. Yeah.
Because I think this episode and kind of this dynamic where he's not living up to the expectations. I think this kind of is a microcosm of the entire series, where you watch this show. No, he's not in the costume. He's not in the glasses. He's not flying, right? He's not there yet. But the core of who he is, that good person who will always find a way.
Yeah.
That's there. Like, that's what this show captures. That's why this show works.
Yeah. And in what this show does so good that a lot of Superman content doesn't do is that they show him as a strong, capable leader, which is like weird to say, but a lot of other like media doesn't do that with Superman,
Yeah. Well, it's a leader. And that makes me think of just this idea of him inspiring them. It's so funny. We talked a lot about how post-crisis in the comics, there's all this business about the pocket universe and everything, like trying to find a way. It's like, well, if Superboy is not in continuity, how the hell does the Legion exist? And it's like, well, can't it just be like, just Clark inspires them, whether he's Superboy or Superman.
Yeah, yeah.
Or a young Superman. It's like, it still works. And I think you see that here.
Yeah.
I mean, just a ton of nice bits where Garth wants him to sign the baseball, right? The heat vision for the CK. And I mean, just kind of this notion of you're going to have this great influence, right? Oh, and all the business about the Persuader being part of this human supremacist movement ties right in with what all the work that Johns did in the comics with the Legion and that whole business.
I think this episode came out like at the same time when he was writing that run on Action Comics.
Yes, you're right. I have to check the dates, but basically, I think that really that lines
around the
up.
same time. Yeah.
Yeah. So
like the Action Comics run, I think.
Yeah.
The Legion. Yeah. That was a great run. Side note, really, really good run.
Yeah. Yeah. It was fun to revisit. It held up great. So yeah, Legion, and they leave Clark with a ring. Mm-hmm. They took away the flight capability though.
Side note, who's your favorite Legionnaire?
Oh, Rock.
Okay.
Yeah. What about you?
I mean, he'd probably be my number 2. My number 1's Karate Kid.
Oh, I thought. Oh, okay. Oh, I thought you meant just in the out of these 3 that we saw. Oh, generally. Oh man, I don't know. I'd have to think. If I'm going based off of that Legion animated series, Bouncing Boy, He was so good in that show. So it depends on I guess it depends on the medium, but they leave Clark the Legion ring, and he'll use this. I think we mentioned this episode briefly, but the later season 8 episode Infamous, when Tori Spelling's character, Linda Lake, threatens to expose his identity. So he decides to get ahead of it, and he tells Lois his secret, and she writes the story. And it's like, Clark Kent, alien from Krypton. And at first it's a great moment. But then the tide turns and the public is after him and the government breaks into the farm and it's this whole bit. And so Clark uses the Legion ring to rewind time. Thought he had learned that lesson after Reckoning not to do that. but then he destroys it. He destroys the ring after that. But then in the season 8 finale, Doomsday, Rock shows up before the battle with Doomsday and gives him the ring again. He's like, don't destroy this one. And then that's what Lois accidentally gets a hold of. And that's what transports her to the future at the end of season 8.
Okay. Yeah.
That whole business. But other than that Rock appearance, and then of course Brainiac 5 in the 200th episode. I mean, that's really the Legion business that we get on the show. But
Rock was really well cast in this. Really well cast. He came off as very, very noble, very altruistic, very, very, I mean, all three of them were pretty well cast, but he popped, I thought.
Did you ever watch Hellcats?
Hellcats. What was that?
It was the college cheerleading CW show that Tom Welling was an executive producer on. But the actor who played Rock was one of the characters there.
It sounds familiar. I don't think I watched it.
It was with Ali Mishalka and Ashley Tisdale.
Don't think so. No.
I don't think you...
Was it a CW show?
Yeah, I don't think we were necessarily a target demo, but I wanted to support Tom Welling, so I watched. And I ended up getting into it. It only lasted one season.
He produced it? He was okay.
Yeah. But that actor ended up... he was one of the regular characters on that show. But yeah, Legion, great. I mean, again, this forward look at the influence he's going to have. And in that final scene with Lana, you see him wrestling with this. He's like, it's a lot to take on. And I think... when we talk Superboy and the Legion, I think that's such a core aspect of all of this, of the weight of what you're supposed to become. Mm-hmm. So I liked what that brought out. Anything else you want to say about Legion?
I think Legion's really cool. The concept's really cool. I think they've got a lot of potential, in media. So hopefully there'll be some more Legion stuff across the board. I think they did a great job with them here.
Yeah, I think this was a strong debut. And I just remember the fact that Jeff Johns wrote this.
Mm-hmm. That was a big deal.
That was big. Jeff Loeb had been a consulting producer on the show, and I think it was seasons 2 through 4. And he wrote or co-wrote some big episodes like Red and Insurgents. He had some great episodes, and just having that comic connection there, I think was important. But then we really hadn't had that in a while, to my knowledge. And then to have Johns come on, and again, he would also then go on to write the Justice Society 2-parter and Booster. It's that was...
Yeah, it was very cool.
It was cool. The Zatanna episode comes later in season 6. That's called Hex. We've talked about a lot of that, but what I wanted to say is it really continues to play with this idea of Chloe, because in this episode, right, Zatanna, she's trying to get this book that will allow her to fully access her magical abilities. She wants to bring back her deceased father, but the ability that she has presently is the ability to grant a wish, not necessarily your deepest desire, but kind of whatever's on your mind at the moment. And so as Chloe is blowing out the candle on her birthday cake or cupcake, she's looking over at Lois. Lois is living the life that Chloe always thought she'd have, working at the Daily Planet side by side with Clark. And so she wakes up the next morning as Lois. So you get to see Erica Durance playing Chloe, which was a lot of fun.
It was cool that they didn't do a body swap.
Agreed.
That was cool that they didn't do a body swap where then Erica Durance would be acting like Chloe. It was literally just which strange for the actor, because Allison Mack didn't have a lot to do that week, apparently.
No. Yeah, I know. She had a very light week, but I mean, that was, again, I feel like Legion is a major instance of kind of the show commenting on itself. They're what the hell becomes of Chloe?
Yeah.
I mean, funny enough, when you get to the end of the series, it's nothing. She's with Oliver. In fairness, in that series finale, I guess it's kind of nebulous whether they're still together, but they have a kid, right? If nothing else. And she's out there. Right? She's Watchtower, I suppose. So the show never gave us that twist. Yeah. It was never she became someone else, or she died, or this or that. But here it's, this whole notion of, does Chloe become Lois? Literally, she becomes Lois. And it was fun. What I liked here was that Clark's own wish is granted, right? But it's different than what we would have gotten from him in earlier seasons, because what Clark articulates, the wish that's ultimately granted, isn't, I don't want to have my powers.
Yeah.
But he does say like he wishes things weren't so weird.
Yeah.
Right. And so he still has his powers after this wish is granted, but he doesn't know that. And he doesn't know about everything that's going on.
Yeah.
But maybe splitting hairs a little bit, but I think it is an important distinction. It's like, because it's the difference between I just wish I were normal and I didn't have powers versus I wish things weren't so weird. There is a difference. And because I think it shows where he is at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, of course, Chloe, in Lois's body, right, is ultimately able to, convince Clark that he can do this, right? He can stop Zatanna before she brings back her father, which will cost someone their life. And he leaps.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We get a leap. I mean, we talked about how the show held off on flight forever, but we do get a number of big leaps.
Yeah. We get the leap here. We get the leap between buildings in season 2, I think. I mean, that was the first one, the first real big one.
Yeah.
But that was cool. It was cool to see him take flight for sure. Or leap.
Almost.
Yeah.
And you see his evolution because he talks Zatanna down, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, and he talks about the loss of his own father. And he's like, I'm finally the man my father always wanted me to be. There's a maturity here, and he's speaking from this lived in experience that he's had of losing his own father. I guess, we talk about like, what does Clark learn from all of these encounters? Here, I feel like he was really the one leading the way for Zatanna more than anything else. I mean, I guess this takeaway of, he doesn't really want things to just be normal because I think as Chloe says to him, it's like, it would kill you to know that there were all these disasters that you could prevent.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I guess maybe that was his takeaway from that one, but it's definitely a Clark like much further along in his journey.
Yeah.
The Idol episode from season 9, that's the one that introduces the Wonder Twins.
I didn't get to rewatch this one.
That's fine. Their role was very minimal, to be honest. It was more about the Blur's role in the city, and there was this corrupt DA running for mayor who wanted the Blur to turn himself in.
Weren't they like street urchins or something in this version? Something like that?
I mean,
like
they
orphans or something?
Not necessarily. They had a place that they stayed, but their whole thing was Idol is the title, right? They kind of idolized the Blur, and they were trying to help the Blur. They were performing their own saves, but they were very messy. They were botching it. Like, there were these undercover cops that they didn't realize were undercover. And so they boxed them up with all this cocaine, and they're like, look, we caught them. But it's like, no, these are undercover cops.
Gotcha.
And they keep showing, the Blur symbol, right? Because that's what Clark had been doing at this point, right? Burning the symbol everywhere.
Yes.
And so they do that. So it looks like the Blur is responsible for this. Like, they're trying to help. They're trying to give him credit, but they're messing it up, and they're actually hurting his reputation.
Gotcha.
But essentially, Clark kind of tracks them down, brings them to Chloe. She gives them a talking to, and they mostly stand down. And then when the opportunity presents itself at the climax of the episode, they help Clark save Lois without revealing his identity as the Blur. So that's it. This was
weird pick for characters to put in the show.
Yeah.
Very weird pick.
Weird pick. I mean, if you're a fan of Super Friends, this is right up your alley, I guess. But this was kind of an obscure pull, I think.
They were created for Super Friends, right? They were never in the comics. Okay. Yeah.
Since then, they've been in the comics. I think during that Bendis era, that whole Wonder Comics imprint that he had, there was a Wonder Twins series.
Oh, okay.
If I'm not mistaken. And the actor who played one of the twins was David Gallagher from Seventh Heaven, Simon from Seventh Heaven.
I never watched that show, so I don't have a connection to that.
But this one, I think, is the outlier in all of these, where yes, they are DC heroes, but this isn't one of those cases of, they're further along, but Clark helps them in some way. It's like they're really just kind of well-intentioned, but slightly misguided, and they're kind of set straight. Yeah. But they're just kids trying to help. I mean, that's kind of the gist of it. And then we get, here's actually a question for you, Ken, because I think this is a matter of debate, and you will see it listed and counted differently in different places online. The JSA story, is it one episode or two? How do you consider it?
2 episodes. 2 episodes.
As do I. They're two episodes.
Two credits roll.
Yes.
Two theme songs play. They're 2 episodes.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. A lot of times it's counted as one. I mean, the way I look at it, they were 2 episodes that happened to be aired together under this kind of umbrella of it's absolute justice. But it's like, no, it was Society and Legends. Like, there were 2 separate episodes that just were aired together. But I mean, you talk about opening up the world. I mean, here it's like we're bringing in the Justice Society, this revelation that we had this whole group that had been active in secret in the past.
Okay. I don't think it works, dude. I gotta be honest, man, because like rewatching, because I remember very clearly when it aired, watching with my buddies in college. Because like even my friends who didn't watch the show were like, dude, big episode, Justice Society, Hawkman, we got to watch it. Like, like, so it was definitely a thing, but like, I don't think it fits with the show. Like the idea that there's superheroes before Clark is weird. Like, so like when he's like a teenager in season 1, why isn't his dad like, well, there's this guy with like a Hawk costume flying around 20 years ago. Like maybe ask him for advice. You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't work in the context of the show. And like, I appreciate everything they were trying to do by showing everything. But like I told you, I was watching it earlier today. And like, when he looks up at that painting and sees him in the costumes, my wife, like she started laughing. She was like, and she's like, the cat guy, like what's up with the cat guy? And I'm like, yeah, it does look kind of insane. Like, in the context of this show that used to be so grounded, but like, I don't know. Like I definitely, as a fan, I appreciate seeing the Flash helmet. I appreciate Hawkman. I appreciate seeing all of it, but I don't think it works in like what this show was supposed to be.
I hear you.
But it's cool seeing them though. You know what I mean? Like
I hear you. I kind of had a similar feeling. Like, here's the thing. I love the JSA. So
yeah.
I think that kind of went a long way towards my enjoying these episodes then and now. And again, talking about the context, I mean, this was well before the Stargirl series, the Black Adam movie. I mean, to see these characters brought to life was really kind of amazing and very unexpected. And certainly never would have predicted this. Even going back to something like Justice, like I never would have expected, they'll do the Justice Society.
Hawkman, yeah.
I mean, I loved it. I loved having the characters presented was cool. I mean, the extent to which it fits into Smallville and this story, I think, is debatable. I mean, go ahead.
But it's just cool to see them though, because like Hawkman is and was one of my visually favorite characters. When he was one of the figures I had when I was a kid, I just thought he looked so cool, and I still think he's got so much untapped potential as a character. Like in comics and everything, I just think he just screams like this guy's cool. So it was so dope to see him in like live action, you know what I mean? For, as much as their budget could allow, like, it was still cool. It was just cool to see them.
Yeah. I mean, essentially the jumping off point for this is that you have the Icicle, the son of the original Icicle, killing members of the Justice Society, kills Sylvester Pemberton, the original Star Spangled Kid, and Wesley Dodds, the original Sandman. And then you have the remaining surviving members, Carter Hall, aka Hawkman, and Kent Nelson, Dr. Fate, and then Sylvester's protege, Courtney Whitmore, Stargirl, she does go by Stargirl at this point. In the comics, originally, she was a Star Spangled Kid. And Jeff Johns had created that character in the comics based off of his late sister who died in a plane crash. So it was, very personally meaningful. And I think that what this highlights had less to do about Clark as an individual and his journey, and I think it was more about the team, right? Because the whole kind of theme of this was that Chloe is trying to kind of unite this budding Justice League in a more formal, substantial way, like get everyone together, get everyone on the same page, facilitate communication, and they're kind of this like ragtag bunch that's all over the world. And what they see in the surviving members of the Justice Society, everything they learn about the Justice Society, is that they really functioned as this family, right? Yeah. That they would get together, they would hang out at the brownstone, they would have dinner, they would celebrate Thanksgiving together, right? So they were this family, a far cry from what this version of the Justice League is. And so I think that's kind of the takeaway for Clark and the team. So I think this one's more about the team as opposed to Clark individually for the most part. But yeah, it's like essentially you find out they were active in secret in the 70s. I don't know if they ever explicitly say exactly the year, but I think from the looks and everything, it's the 70s. Yeah. So not World War II era, but they were this group operating in secret. So it's like, to your point about
they
like why
that secret though.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, how secret could they have been if you had a Green Lantern?
Yeah.
And you have a Hawkman with wings.
And like, and that painting is like that. These aren't the painting is not like, these aren't like proto Smallville costumes. This is like straight up the comic book like costumes, right? And like they couldn't have been that secret because like the cops were like arresting them with like someone videotaping it. You know what I mean? Like, which is another thing where I was like, who's videotaping this footage? Like,
I think this was an instance of the show trying to have its cake and eat it too. I mean, clearly Johns loves this idea and he really plays with it in Doomsday Clock. And we've talked about it of, kind of Clark being the linchpin, the bridge between the past of the DCU. He's inspired by the Justice Society and the future. He in turn inspires the Legion.
Yeah.
And so I think you see John's trying to kind of bring that idea into play here. But yeah, the notion that they were operating, but no one ever knew. I mean, that's quite a bit of a stretch. But I don't know. I mean, I think I don't know. For me, it worked well enough. It didn't really take me out of it.
I feel like how do I put this? Like it works in the part of the show where it airs, right? Like in season 9 or 8, 9, right?
9.
Yeah. But like, if you think about season 1 and 2 and 3, like that's to me where it's like, it doesn't fit. But like the show, as we've said, has changed so much from like the first 5 seasons, then to like season 7 and 8, and then to 6, 7, and 8, and then like 9 and 10. Like they're just different like iterations. So like it does fit in that regard, but like, yeah, just because when I think of the show, I do think those early years so much that like, for me, it's like, it doesn't jive completely, but I think Jeff did the absolute best version that would be in the show. You know what I mean? To use all these characters. Like it was really cool.
Yes. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think on the Clark front specifically, what so stands out is the conversation he has with Dr. Fate, right? Where he talks about how you will lead this generation of heroes, just like Hawkman once led ours. And
cool.
It will begin when people look up into the sky with hope for tomorrow, and you'll usher in a silver age of heroism. And I love how Clark's like, you sound like another group I met from the future, but you're just as cryptic as they are. And he's like, well, I'll be more specific. He's like, even though Lex Luthor is your ultimate opponent, you will triumph over him. You know, Lex is dead. He doesn't say anything.
Yeah. You know what I did notice though is that he's like, Lois is the key.
Yeah.
And I was like, I wonder if Zack Snyder took that from this.
I guess once again, Smallville is the blueprint.
Smallville's the blueprint.
But yeah, I mean,
Jeff's got all the best ideas, man.
And I think the other exchange that I really loved is at the end when Carter and Clark are talking, and Carter's like, you're not like the others. Like, you're not in this for glory or vengeance. You're not doing this because you have a chip on your shoulder. And it's, I think, always an important reminder, even though at this point in the show, we're really kind of establishing this idea that Clark is part of this larger team, but Clark still stands apart, I think, in a very important way. As a Superman fans, I know we feel like that. And so I enjoyed that, that kind of being articulated. And then at the end, you have Ollie and Chloe and John Jones going out for dinner together. Right? Like Ollie shows up at the Watchtower. He's like, nothing's going on. I just kind of thought, if anyone wanted to grab dinner. So you see them kind of taking something away from that experience with the Justice Society.
Yeah.
So
I know that's the thing that Jeff really likes about the Justice is the family aspect. Like he puts that in like a lot of his books, like Flash had that big family aspect too. And it's one of the things I like the most about his writing. Cause like, I think there is like a tendency to like lean dark and gritty with stuff. And I like when stories like they do lean in like the hopeful and optimistic and like fun,
Yeah. No, for sure. I think it's a stretch to kind of make this fit into the Smallville world. But I think to the extent that it could be done, I think I'm happy with what this was able to do. And just as a fan of these characters, it was really, really cool to see that. And we get to the end. This wasn't something we rewatched, but at the end of season 9 in the Salvation episode, the finale, there's this sequence where they're in Watchtower and Clark is talking to a bunch of these other heroes on screens. So like you see Carter and you see Dinah and you see Victor and you see John Jones and basically debating what to do about the Kandorians. But it's really kind of this idea, like they really have formed this network. Stargirl is there as well. And then at the beginning of season 10, after Clark has fallen off the roof of the building with the blue kryptonite after fighting Zod, and he's having this near-death experience and communing with Jor-El. And Jor-El's like, I told you to rule them with strength. You chose the martyr's path. And he's like, no, I left behind a team of heroes to protect the world. Like really this idea that he's, really tried to cultivate and build them up into something. Clearly they continue to play with that idea.
It's cool.
And then last, but certainly not least, because I quite enjoyed this episode, we have another Jeff Johns written one, Booster, one of the final episodes of the series that introduces Booster Gold himself, Ted Cord and his civilian scientist guys, and the Jaime Reyes version of Blue Beetle. And I guess I know you didn't have a chance to rewatch this one, which is totally fine. I feel like this was Booster Gold, like right off the pages.
I do remember that from when I watched it originally. Like Booster they nailed Booster completely.
1,000%. And it's like what Booster brings out at this point, because we're towards the end of the series, Clark knows he needs to take that step into the light, but he and Lois are sort of working on devolving Clark Kent, essentially, like morphing him into the more mild-mannered, bumbling iteration that people would kind of just look past and not connect with the Blur, with the public-facing Blur. And Clark is struggling with this a little bit, and Lois is giving him all this advice about, like, slouch a little bit and speak a little bit higher. And, of course, he's wearing the glasses and the trench coat and all of that.
Why do you think they took so long to get to that in the show?
Because Tom Welling didn't want to wear glasses. I'm almost positive that's why. I think when you watch the episode, as resistant as Clark is to the glasses, I think that's kind of indicative of how Tom Welling felt. I mean, I honestly, and when Zach was on Talkville, he asked Tom Welling, did you not want to wear the glasses? And he confirmed it. So I think the fact that we got as much as we did is something.
Yeah.
But I think what this episode highlights is that you have Clark, again, not quite ready to step forward, right? And struggling with this new identity that he's crafting for himself. And it plays great. The scene where he goes to interview Ted Cord, and he's like tripping over his words, and he's like, "Oh, do you have a bathroom? I had a milkshake on my way in and it's not sitting right." Like it is humorous, even though it's not my favorite iteration of the Clark persona, but I love the way he played it.
Yeah.
But as Clark is kind of struggling with this, he's faced with this hero who is public facing, who is able to stand in front of everyone and have that reaction. Now, he's not doing it for the right reasons, Booster, right? He wants the fame, he wants the money, and that's the journey that he has to go through. So again, still helping each other. But I think that kind of contrast was really interesting in that episode.
Yeah, no, it was my memory of it was that I really liked how they portrayed Booster. I know in the car over here we were talking about you didn't love the Blue Beetle visuals, but Booster looked cool.
I mean, look, after the Blue Beetle movie, it's really hard to look back at this. All right, it was a little weak, but I loved how Booster played. And I mean, this gives us Clark changing in a phone booth.
Oh yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
And we talked in an earlier episode about Homecoming, when he has this whole lesson from Brainiac 5 about a hero is made in the moment. And that's what he says to Booster in that episode.
That's a cool call.
It's like a hero is made in the moment by the choices he makes and the reasons he makes them. Like he's kind of taking it forward, like what he's learned. So I like that a lot. Now, as we wrap up here, just to put a bow on everything, I know we've been focusing generally on the show's depictions of these characters and specifically on the episodes that introduced each of these heroes. But I just wanted to sort of pull back for a moment here. And I know you didn't rewatch these episodes specifically, so I'll just do a little bit of a solo lightning round here, just to kind of chart some of the subsequent appearances that these heroes made on the show that we didn't specifically hit on. So with respect to the Justice League, we would go on and see a couple of other configurations of the team, specifically in season 8. Ollie, Dinah, and AC team up in Odyssey at the beginning of season 8 to track down Clark after he's gone missing following the collapse of the fortress. Really cool. You get that really fun scene on the streets of Metropolis at night where they decide to go their separate ways for the time being because they're being hunted. But it was a really cool moment. I was less enamored with the Justice League business in the season 8 finale, Doomsday. There we have Ollie, Dinah, and Bart this time. And they ultimately go against Clark in terms of how to try to take down Davis Bloom / Doomsday. Maybe the less said about that Doomsday episode, the better. But they are there at the beginning and the end of season 8. We talked about those cameos at Watchtower on the screens in Salvation at the end of season 9. And then in season 10, hand in hand with all of the dark side business, there's also this whole storyline about the Vigilante Registration Act, the VRA. And so we see a number of return appearances in season 10. Black Canary pops up for a couple. Stargirl pops up for a couple. AC returns in the episode Patriot. And this time he's side by side with Mera, who makes her Smallville debut. So that was really cool. And Carter perhaps has the most significant out of these season 10 appearances. He meets his end, for this life at least, in the episode Icarus. But prior to that, the second episode of season 10, which is called S.H.I.E.L.D., Lois is with Carter in Africa, and she's really at a crossroads in terms of her life and career, and Carter shares about his backstory with Shiera and all of that. And there's this really great scene at the end where Lois is like, I'm not like you and Shiera and Clark. And Carter starts quoting Nietzsche. And he's like, Nietzsche believed that the true hero is the person who can embrace and become the best version of themselves. And Nietzsche called that person Ubermensch. And Lois goes, a Superman. So it's a great moment at a pivotal time for Lois. And then finally, Oliver. Like we said, Justin Hartley becomes a series regular for seasons 8, 9, and 10. Charting his journey across those final seasons could be its own episode. But just really quickly, I wanted to mention that early in season 8, we see Oliver's backstory on the island, and Oliver learns a critical piece of information that Lionel was responsible for the deaths of Oliver's parents. And this ties back to that Veritas arc that we talked about in our Lex episode. But this also kind of veers into that complaint that I brought forth earlier in this episode about the crossing of the streams when it comes to the origin stories. So Lionel's role in the deaths of the queens, not my favorite aspect of all of this, but it's a huge motivator for Oliver. And ultimately it will in part lead to Oliver killing Lex in the episode Requiem, which we also talked about. And his guilt over that, his guilt over the death of Henry James Olsen at the end of season 8 really sends Ollie into this downward spiral and a very dark place in season 9. Eventually, Chloe stages his intervention for him. He pulls out of it. We get into season 10, and he has his Iron Man moment where in the midst of all of this anti-vigilante sentiment, he steps forth and says, I am Green Arrow. And then as we get to the end of the season and the show generally, he is corrupted by the darkness and is about to use gold kryptonite on Clark in the series finale, but Clark is able to help him break free of that. So again, that's a real quick version of Oliver in those final seasons, but I wanted to at least mention that. So there you have it. Listen, I think we did it.
This is a great episode, dude. This is a good, hopefully your listeners will be happy with this. Like, how long have we been going? Like 2 hours?
2.5 hours.
Nice.
Anytime you and I can talk Smallville, you know I always love it. And hopefully we did justice, no pun intended, to these characters. I think overall, the show far more often than not stuck the landing with these characters that they brought in. I think it was a big swing every time to kind of open up that world, whether we got more proto versions in hoods and glasses, or we got fully formed costumed versions of the characters. It opened up the world. It helped Clark move along in his journey and kind of opened up other sides of his character and dynamics to play and just kind of broadened out the world. And it's weird because we watched so many of these together. So, you can kind of look at it as, oh my God, there's so many heroes on Smallville.
Yeah.
We had well over 200 episodes. It was not the predominant aspect of the show, but where and when we had it, it was really entertaining.
It was a highlight for sure. Cause like it always felt like a special event. Like even, you know what I mean? Like leading when there's a preview, like we're bringing this character on. It's like, oh cool. I can't wait till next week to see it, So it would definitely is something that I think was really cool that they added, because when we started this conversation, they totally could have not done it in the show and it would have been totally fine. Like if they just never had any of these characters on there at all, but like they didn't. I think for more often than not, it worked incredibly well.
Right on. Well, I thank you as always. I encourage everyone to go to your link tree, which again is in the show notes, and check out everything that you're working on. Audience, I thank you as always appreciate you tuning in. We'll be back next week to talk about the villains of the DCU that the show adapted over its 10-year run. Make sure you come back for that. And until then, as always, it's about what you do. It's about action. Be sure to check out our sister podcast series, Another Exciting Episode in the Adventures of Superman, an episode-by-episode breakdown of the classic George Reeves television show, available wherever you get podcasts. Please join us on social media, become a patron, and subscribe, rate, and review today. Links are in the show notes. Thank you all.